It had been 15 years since the last entry in the Alien franchise, not counting the AVP travesties anyway, so when Prometheus hit in 2012 with director Ridley Scott returning, the excitement levels were pretty high. Maybe we should just stop making prequels. Please? Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always, David.
I come in peace.
I said it weird because there's a character in this movie who's just named David. No last name.
Yeah,
so
that's just me. That's who I am. You don't need to know my last name.
It just occurred to me as I was saying in your intro there. But yeah, welcome everyone. This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together, we talk about sci-fi movie. It's that simple. It's Alien Day when this goes out, as in the 26th of April, because LV426. Fun.
But Pete, this movie didn't have...
Shut up.
LV426.
We'll be talking about what LVs are in this movie in just a bit.
All right.
You secure that shit, David. Secure it.
Sorry. Got it.
So yes, Alien Day, last few years, when Tara was on the show, we were once a year on Alien Day. We did Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, and of course Alien Resurrection. The AVP movies we did separately. We sort of tied them into the Predator movies. But, you know, we're here, 5th Alien Day. It's time for Prometheus, which is the next Alien movie in the franchise. We won't be waiting until next year, though, for Alien Covenant, because there's a new Alien movie out this year, so we have to do it before the new one. So this will actually be the last Alien Day where we have an Alien movie from the Alien franchise to talk about. So, fun. Welcome. Yeah. Hope you're all celebrating. Funnily enough, we're actually recording this on St. Patrick's Day, but Alien Day is more important.
Yeah, for sure. I woke up this morning and I was like, now I could have myself a drink, or I could speak professionally about the masterful cinematic work that is Prometheus. Golly gee.
So yes, welcome. We'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. But just before we do get started, I will I will remind you. Consider it a warning, actually. Consider it a warning. You're in trouble if you don't hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, hit the like button. It's your duty, okay?
If you don't hit the like button, Alien Romulus is going to be the worst movie of the year. And nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that. Nobody wants another bad Alien movie, okay? No one wants that. So, yeah, there's that. Also, at the end of the show, I'll tell you about the bonus shows, the bonus monthly shows that me and David do over on Patreon. I'll tell you about all the bonus content and all those other goodies at the end. But we will get into Prometheus, which is a prequel to Alien. It is a Ridley Scott directed movie that came out in 2012, and I have to say, at the time, I was very excited about this because...
Oh, I'm sure.
You know, Alien Resurrection was the last standalone Alien movie. The AVP movies were, you know, train wrecks.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh, we're back to just having an Alien movie. That's exciting. Ridley Scott's back to direct. He did the first one. That's kind of a big deal. And, you know, you wanted to like it. You tried to convince yourself that it was good. You tried to, like, okay, it wasn't great, but, you know, it's not all bad. I have to say, this is the third time I think I've seen this. It has gotten worse for me every time I've watched it.
Okay.
So, more on that later. But obviously, I have a storied past with this movie because I care about the franchise. I saw it when it came out. I saw it maybe like 5 years ago when me and Connor talked about it. So, here I am again with another round of Prometheus. Whereas you, David, had never seen Prometheus.
I had not. So, for anybody who doesn't know, on this show, I do homework at the end of every episode where I go back and watch a movie that you guys reviewed, and I had some real trouble trying to fit in all 4 Alien movies before getting to this one, but I did do it. I can't remember for the life of me what they were tied to, but I think it was mostly the Mad Max movies, wasn't it?
It doesn't matter. You did it. You caught up. You rewatched them all.
I got there.
You're coming into this with the best possible mindset of having a good memory of the Alien universe.
Yep, absolutely. And I feel pretty good that I remembered everything I needed to remember. And I mean, are you asking me for my thoughts now? Should I just say them?
Well, I suppose I'll usually give the brief premise before I do that. So, yeah, this movie is set before the events of the previous Alien movies. It's set. There's a quick scene in 2089 which I only remember because I'll be 100 that year if I make it. I won't, but if I did, I'd be 100 that year.
Strangely enough, the second part of the movie is 2093, right?
That sounds right, yeah.
Yeah, that's when I'll be 100. So
funny. Okay, there you go. But yes, they find some archaeological evidence pointing them to a planet in distant space, and our team of scientists and whatnot go out to try and investigate what all these cave paintings and stuff were referring to. They're looking for the answers to life, like who made human beings, who did all that stuff. But of course, everyone going to see this was like, this is an Alien prequel. This is set in the Alien universe. Yep. So we'll be talking about those expectations and maybe how the movie does or doesn't deliver on those things. But yes, David, what did you think of Prometheus? That's the right noise. That's the right noise.
Yeah, it is. It is. Because this is a movie of two parts. This is a movie where one half of the script is really deep in on these philosophical meanings of, you know, what is a god and his creation's relationship supposed to be from both sides of that? What side, like, if like even like a father-child sort of relationship as well. There's all this idea of creating, and then what is your responsibility for the creation itself. And I'm super interested in that sort of stuff. I think there is a deep philosophical examination that could have been done here. But strangely enough, with the idea that it is an Alien prequel, I felt like it was shackled down by that. All of these lofty goals it had of like, let's do an examination of God itself and what that means. They were like, right, but we need to have the space jockey. We need to have the face huggers. We need to have all this extra stuff that all the audience is expecting to see, even if it doesn't fit into the plot that we're trying to tell here. So in a way, it fails at both. And worst of all, it's just kind of unengaging the whole time. I didn't feel like I cared about any of the characters as they were doing their things. Even when it was like super tense, there was just nothing there that I was like, okay, and? So, guess I could say it wasn't that good, Pete. And that's on my first go around, so I can only imagine where you're sitting at. I
think there was almost like a Stockholm Syndrome effect in the first viewing back in 2012. It's like, well, we finally got an Alien movie by Ridley Scott. This has to be good. We can't accept that this is just not good. What's so funny about it, though, is that he never got to make his third movie, because, you know, there was one that he wanted to do after Covenant, and it did occur to me that effectively he might have ended up making a prequel trilogy to the Alien franchise. And we all know prequel trilogies for established franchises always go well. Yeah,
I would love to see a Xenomorph standing on the edge of a lava river saying, "This is the end for you, my master."
Yeah, this movie, it's rough. Like, conceptually, I don't have a problem with any of the things, like you say, that it clearly has got an interest in doing something with, but I don't think any of them are actually done well in the movie. Everything feels undercooked. Everything feels like we're barely scratching the surface, and some of it can thematically tie to Alien, because Alien's whole thing was that it was all this kind of like story of motherhood, right? So many things in that movie. The computer was called Mother. The alien creature itself was a forced pregnancy that a man had to go through. And, like, you know, all the various penis and vaginal things. Like, it was constant symbolism in the movie. That's what it was about. And then Aliens took that further, with the alien queen being this like monster, this woman whose only purpose is to reproduce without any of the humanity. Contrasting with Ripley having a genuine connection to a daughter who's not really hers. You know, the idea that the blood's not the important part, it's the bond, it's the empathy, it's the caring, all that stuff, right? There's so much stuff in those, particularly the first two movies, that really ties into those themes of motherhood and parenthood, and, you know, they're very pro-choice movies, of course. Like, that's the horror of the film, is that you're forced to give birth to something you didn't want to give birth to, right? That's the whole thing. So I can see how you take that and try and pivot it into some of these themes. I can also see how you take the idea of the androids that are in Alien universe and try and do something with that. If anything, it felt like they wanted to do like a 2001 thing, because, you know, the whole thing in 2001 is that the crew in 2001 are off to try and find where the signal's from, which seemingly might have come from whoever made us, right? The creator, like the dawn of our existence That's what we're chasing. But in the movie, the antagonist is a creation of man. It's the computer, the artificial intelligence that's fighting them. And you can almost see how maybe, they're doing something like that with the android, and David's like got his own curiosities, and he himself points out throughout the film a couple times, to Logan Marshall Green's character, hey, you created me. Like, how would you feel if your creator said that to you? And like, they sort of like broach those topics. But goddamn, I could not give a shit about anyone in this movie. The characters are so paper thin because there's too many. Like, when you have like an ensemble cast, obviously you can't completely flesh them all out. You can't. And even in the original Alien or Aliens, they're not all fleshed out, right? Some of them are obviously B and C tier. That's just how it works. But I swear, even the characters in this that we're supposed to care about, they're just there because they're supposed to be characters there, and they're not actually adding anything to the movie. I think Idris Elba's in this as the pilot, the captain of the ship, and I felt like there was big moments for him that are supposed to be a big deal to like near the back half of the movie, but they just like, you've not made me connect to this guy or care about him or understand who he is or anything. He's just a cardboard cutout, and that goes for a lot of the characters in this. It's a shit. It wastes such a good cast. There's a lot of good actors in this movie.
I'm not going to spoil what it is, but my homework movie that I did at the end of this is another one that has kind of an ensemble cast to it. And I remember going into that movie after watching this, and I thought like, I can't imagine I'm going to end up caring about half these characters. But then I did. And it had a larger cast, I think, than this movie did. So it really isn't even a matter of how many characters there are. It's just how they treated them. And like you said, I don't think that anybody outside of David and arguably our main lead actress, Shaw, which is a damning statement that I am considering the lead actress is not getting enough development.
Yeah, I mean, we have Noomi Rapace, and we looked up how to pronounce her name, so it's right.
She said it herself, Rapace.
So she plays Shaw, our lead character. Her husband is played by Logan Marshall Green, who, when I saw this movie, I didn't know him. I actually really like him now, because he's been in The Invitation. He was in a fantastic miniseries from Cinemax called Quarry. So I've seen him be really good in some stuff, so I kind of like seeing him in this now, because I know who he is. But at the time, he was just like, he kind of looks like Tom Hardy. In fact, he was an upgrade. That's where you saw him last.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen him on here.
Yeah. Michael Fassbender plays David, the android. And that's not a secret, really. That's open from the start of the movie that's what he is. There's no trickery here. Charlize Theron plays Meredith Vickers. She's the captain, I guess, of the ship.
She is the corporate hand. She's the I'm blanking on his name from Aliens, I should say.
Oh, Paul Reiser's character you're talking about, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she's kind of that, but she's more like directly in charge, where she's throwing her weight around kind of thing.
Yeah, but I think that's only because this is a Wayland-funded trip. So she's the one who's able to make all the calls because the money is all from her side of things.
Yes, not Wayland Yutani. The companies have not merged yet. It's just Wayland. It's an important detail. Prequel detail to
I actually really like that. It fleshes out the universe a lot.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Like,
somewhere in the middle there was just a big corporate merger, and it's like not even worth noticing.
And that feels like true to life, big companies merging. So like that's a fine detail. I have no complaints about it just being Wayland. That makes sense. Idris Elba, like we said, plays the captain. You've got Peter Wayland, who we kind of see is who sent them on this mission, the head of Wayland. He's in an old age makeup, which made me think we were going to get a flashback at some point when he was young, and that's why they cast a younger actor in old age makeup. Yep. But that never happened, so I guess they just wanted Guy Pearce.
Well, no, apparently they were going to do that, but it hit the cutting room floor.
It got cut. Okay, fair enough. Yep. So now it's just left dangling like a weird thing. Okay.
The only thing is they apparently did a bunch of like ARG sort of stuff with as part of the marketing, and apparently they did like a fake TED Talk that was supposed to take place in 2023, and that's the only time you get to see him as he was supposed to be in young makeup.
Interesting. Okay. So that's kind of the main characters for the most part. There's some B-tier characters, one of whom is played by Rafe Spall, who I do also know from other things since this movie came out. Benedict Wong's also in there as one of the pilots. But they're pretty, they're tiny characters. They're in terms of like, importance of screen time. They're just bodies. They try and like have the two pilots have a little bit of like a running joke so that it feels like they have characters, but honestly it falls very flat. So yeah, cast, obviously a lot of big names in here, although I will say Idris Elba's accent, I like the first time he spoke I thought, oh, he's just an English guy in this, he's just using his English accent, but then for like the rest of the movie he was like trying to do like a thick American accent.
Yeah, it's deep south.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, he's not English. He's just slipping often enough that I didn't realize at first that he was doing an American accent.
Yeah, deep south is, I think, closest to like English, but it makes it hard to tell sometimes when you are expecting him to go English.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he definitely slips at times, because I had the same thought. I was like, oh, it's just him. And then all of a sudden he's like, well, I reckon. And I'm like, excuse me? You what?
So just sort of broad complaints, okay, that sounds really negative to say. We're just going to start complaining, but to be honest, I don't have a lot of positive thoughts, so it's going to be fair. Mostly negatives. Okay, I will say this: it looks high quality. There's a lot of details went into the effects and things like that. It looks visually good. Maybe not the most stylish or anything, but certainly of high quality for sure.
Yeah, I mean they definitely did a lot of practical effects and set building and such in order to allow people to like work with the stuff rather than just setting it all on a green screen. And I think that really pays off well. I think that they did a fantastic job of feeling like this is an actual world instead of just a green screen set. There's one part in the third act as the final like action piece is happening where the characters begin running and they hold on them running for a very extended period of time. And all I could think in that moment is, if this were green screen, the set would end. They couldn't run for that long because they would reach the end of the set. So it actually kind of works out that they found these on-location places to shoot, because it engages me a bit more in the universe.
Hey, you say that, but I'm sure there's a green screen room out there somewhere with a big treadmill where they can just sort of run in place.
Oh, I'm sure. But they didn't. They did actually find a place to go.
It looks like they did some on locations. Obviously, a lot of it is still green screen in terms of like there's things there that couldn't be there, but
right.
Yeah, but yeah, it does seem like they were shooting maybe in like Iceland or somewhere like that to give a kind of otherworldly look, because Iceland is alien looking to most people. So
it is.
Yeah, but even at the start of the movie, like as the opening titles are playing, there's like all these shots of like Earth, and it's like before life began on Earth, so it's just all these great like almost like aerial helicopter or drone shots, and I was watching this in 4K, and yeah, it looked very pretty, like all the detail of like seeing all these waterfalls and just the the landscapes and whatnot. So yeah, first thing. So my first complaint is kind of like a twofold thing, and it's not like the biggest deal, but it is something that really bugs me. This is supposed to be set before Alien, and yet everything looks super sleek and more high tech than Alien.
Yeah,
I know some people defend and say, well, yeah, but the ship in Alien was like a minor. It was like they were like truck drivers in space. It was it was run down. It was crappy. It wasn't like high tech. This is a scientist ship. I'm like, yeah, but the ship in Aliens is a military vessel, and if the real world's taught me anything, is that the military's always at the cutting edge of technology. So this makes no sense. But even if you take away the prequel part where it doesn't make sense why everything's got holograms and like see-through displays and all this slick shit that they're doing, even just from an aesthetic point of view, like I think it's okay for some science fiction to be like, hey, we don't have to try and make everything look like it's an Apple commercial. We can have tactile buttons because we just choose to do it because it looks cool. And I always appreciate when sci-fi does that. And it feels like the most default thing to do now if you're doing something set in the future is just to do it as sleek as possible, because that's where we see everything going.
I mean, yeah, that's the problem, is that this, back when we made Alien, that was the idea of the future. Nobody could conceive of the idea that we were going to have this sort of stuff, because we were working with what we had at the moment. Nowadays, we look at current market trends, we look at what kind of tech we think is going to be possible, and we extrapolate from there. So it's a problem of retrofuturism catching up to actual future. And I understand the idea that they would like to update it, but it does drive this wedge between what you saw there and what you expect to see in the future. I think the only one that handled it even kind of decently, and that is a big give for it, is the Star Wars franchise. Because
really?
Because, well, not in anything you saw in the movies. That that doesn't do it. But the original trilogy was obviously very 70s, 80s aesthetic, moved forward. And then the prequel trilogy had more modern sensibilities. Everything was a bit more sleek and whatnot. But what I enjoyed is when they started filling out the in-between with like the Disney Plus shows, they basically showed how it was because the Empire just started sucking so hard that like everything monetary and like all the tech and stuff like that had to basically be rolled back because everything was suffering and wasn't able to get those sleek designs. I think that works a little bit better as an explanation. But here, yeah, there's nothing. Yeah. There's no reason that it shouldn't be that same jump forward.
You lost me though right at the start of that though when you said later on when they filled it out in the Disney Plus shows in between things. I'm like, piss off. Like I don't care about that.
I mean, I view it all as one continuous universe. It's not that I'm saying I'm watching it. I only watched like one season of Mandalorian. I haven't even caught the rest, but that is the background to it. That is that in-between area.
And even then I would say, even if I was into the idea of watching all that, and I'm not, but if I was, it'd be like, that's still them putting like they're putting some tape over a problem that was created already. They're patching something in because they realize it doesn't link up. But I just think like this idea of everything in the future, like people actually, like the filmmakers trying to predict what the future is actually going to look like, is almost just this weird fallacy, and it's why sometimes just have fun with it. Pick a design aesthetic, a choice that you want to like focus on, and yeah, you can have some things that feel like, oh, this is where this might go someday. But I don't care if this is accurate to 2089 because I'm not going to be alive in 2089. I don't care. And the people who are around and like watching old movies are going to think, like, when I watch a movie that's set in like like Blade Runner 1, right? I don't love Blade Runner 1, but when I watch that and it says 2019, I'm not going, oh, this is bullshit. It says 2019. 2019's came and went, and it was nothing like that.
Hey, man, that's how I feel about Back to the Future, too. I'm still upset.
I'm not, because they had no intention of being like, this is what 2015's actually going to be like. They just had fun with it, right?
Oh, no, I'm upset with reality that we didn't manage to catch up with what Back to the Future 2 had.
We could use more hoverboards. I do agree with that. But, yeah. So it's got this ultra sleek, like, feel to it. Everything's shiny and whatnot.
I want to give one thing to set designers. Like, anybody who's doing future tech, I want you to understand something, okay? No one will want to use transparent screens that you can see from the back. No. Nobody will ever want that, because if there's one thing we know about new technology, it's whatever porn works on. And no one is gonna use that.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, I don't mind the again, it's weird that it's in this versus the other Alien movies, but I don't mind like the central thing on the bridge having this like hologram display that everyone, because it's like a model. It's like, that comes up and it's like a map that everyone can look at. That makes sense to me because it's meant to be for everyone. But yeah, like the idea of like tablets and shit that are glass that you can see, like no one's gonna want to do that. Yeah. Anyway, so that's like just like a quick, because it's one of the first complaints I have when I watch the movie, because once we jump ahead to the ship, it's like, oh, instantly that's what you're inundated with, So you've got that. I think if we're talking about it on prequel terms, like things that don't like, obviously we'll get into specifics here and we'll talk about stuff in spoilers, but I think just in a general sense, I will say that instead of like giving you a taste of like the world before the first Alien movie, all it does is intentionally confuse things. Maybe because they wanted more movies and they thought, oh no, we have to get 2 more movies to explain how it links up eventually to Alien. But I mean, you made a joke right at the start. You said LV246 isn't in, or 426 isn't in this, and you're right. And when I saw this in the cinema, when it came up saying LV233, I was like, wait a minute, that's not right. What are you talking about, movie?
Where the hell are we going?
Right, and I was waiting for how they would end up somewhere else or whatever. And it has this really annoying trend in this movie of like doing something that's kind of like something from an Alien movie, but always intentionally being different. And it just kind of feels like this is not because you had a fun, different idea. You're kind of like just still banking on people caring because it's like Alien at moments, but you're doing it in a way where you like, don't want to like give in and do the actual thing. It's almost we were talking about Ghostbusters 2016 on Collector's Cut, it's almost like going into that territory is like where you want all the nostalgia and you want all the cheap pops for doing the things that people recognize, but you don't actually want to commit to doing any of it. So it's all just quick little like flashes of it as opposed to actually doing a story around it.
And that's what I was saying at the beginning of my initial thoughts, is that it feels like it's shackled by the Alien franchise. Like, if they wanted to do an Alien prequel, then there were 1,000 different ways they could have done that. And obviously we'll get into spoilers as to what like level the actual like xenomorphs and facehuggers and stuff play in this movie, but suffice to say, not as much as you would like from an Alien prequel. So it makes me think that the primary focus is all of this God talk. It's all of this idea of finding your creators and what is humanity really doing with everything.
It's funny as well, when I started the movie, and the opening after the titles plays, I was like, oh yeah, a lot of this is about like the search for the creators of humanity. And I just sort of groaned and went, oh, that's right, so much of this movie's that. And I think, like you said, it's shackled by being an Alien prequel. I think it's shackled on both sides. I think the Alien movie's shackled by all these things that clearly Ridley and the writers want to do that isn't what anyone wants from an Alien movie. There is actually, I'll talk more about this in spoilers, but there is actually something Ridley Scott said in a really old commentary track for the first Alien movie where it does kind of link up with something that's in this, right? Okay. But it sounded much better when he just said it as like one sentence, because it was like, oh, that's quite interesting to think about, but actually going through all these steps of showing all these bits and pieces and like over-explaining things, because that's the thing, it's like, because you're not doing quite exactly the Alien stuff, you're just kind of getting kind of close, you're actually convoluting it to the point where it's like, hey, no, there's more steps to this before we get to Alien. And I think one of the big things we talk about when we get to Covenant in, you know, a couple months' time or whenever, is that movie does that thing where like the reason for the traditional classic xenomorph existing is so convoluted and there's so much story to it because there has to be an explanation. You know, again, compared to Ghostbusters, there has to be a story to how they found the logo. It can't just be the logo. We kind of get into that problem with like the creation of the alien as a specific thing. But anyway, well, that's all for later. So the characters are dumb. They're meant to be scientists, and they do a lot of dumb things. Yeah, that's frustrating.
I think something that, not to stay on the characters, sorry, just wanted to tack on one last thing.
Oh, go on.
I think that another thing that bothers me in terms of where we leave this movie, and like you're saying how many more steps it's going to take in order to get to the alien that we're familiar with. This is like less than 30 years between this movie in 2093 and Alien 1, which is 2122. So less than 30 years is supposed to happen, yet it feels like there's this massive chasm that is supposed to happen between there, and it doesn't feel plausible at this point.
Yeah, because I was still thinking there was going to be something that happened very quickly at the end that just sort of that was it, neatly tied in a bow, and it didn't. I actually quite hate the ending because it just further says, oh, we're not interested in actually making an alien movie, we're interested in doing all this weird other shit that you know you're not really here for. So we'll get into all that. I think one of the other big problems with this movie is that, well, it's not too long. It's just about 2 hours, right? Which is fine for an alien movie, I think. Is that I think it has a real problem with momentum. It feels like sort of ramps up to an extent up to about like almost the middle, and then it feels like it kind of like slows down again. It feels like we go to like character beats that it's almost like at that point they try to like make us get to know some of the characters a bit better, but it's like, this is what you should have been doing in Act 1. So given the captain this little moment here where we get a little bit of personality, feels like, why are we still doing stuff where there's no like tension in this late in the movie? We're you know, an hour in, over an hour in even, and we're doing the quiet beats before things have even started, before people even realize there's a big danger coming. And I'm like, this needs to like be ramping. This needs to be feeling like we're on a train to disaster by this point, or whatever it may be. So yeah, that's another big problem with it.
Yeah, no, there's I don't want to say too much, but I think there is a tension, and like everything that the movie is building to happens pretty much at the midpoint here. of like exploring themes and such like that. It's right at the midpoint. And then there's a character who's essentially drugged by another character. And you think that like they are now aware of this. They know that's happened and we reach this high point. And then they decide to go off on a little expedition with that same character again. And it's just like, why are we doing this? We've already established that like this character should be angry and hurt and upset at what this character has done. But like, nah, it's more important to figure out why God doesn't like us.
Yeah, it's not even pacing per se. I think the movie's finely paced. It's just that it doesn't have story momentum, right? I think those are two slightly different things. It's not like nothing's happening or that, like. But that said, though, there are some elements that feel very rushed to me. I'll talk about that more in spoilers. But there's definitely some escalations where, because it felt like it was wasting time in other things for some moments, that jumping to like a 10 in tension and like the next scene feels unearned because you weren't building up to it at appropriate pacing. So. Yeah, I find this a very frustrating movie to watch. I find it to be dipping its toes in at least two different completely separate ideas and fumbling the ball on both of them. And even the characters don't leave me thinking, oh, at least I like the characters. At least I was sort of into their thing. I wasn't. And even some of the ways that it introduces some of its ideas feel really forced and lame to me. There's a reveal about halfway through, and I don't think this is spoiling too much just to say this part, where we find out the main character can't have kids, and the way that comes out in conversation made me like groan in my chair, because it just felt so like, oh, we have to create this drama in this moment.
If this were an actual conversation I was having with this character, I would accuse her of just like, this isn't about that. Stop trying to make everything about this. It feels like something that just comes up over dinner every 3 weeks, where it's just like, well, what do you mean baby carrots? I can't have babies. It's like,
yeah, I mean, it's not quite that extreme, but it's almost like, that joke makes sense to me, because it is kind of like, oh, he was clearly not talking about that, but then she makes it about that. Yeah, it's yeah. I'm trying to think of what else to talk about before spoilers. I think the music's fine, but I do think it's kind of odd that the main theme is this kind of hopeful exploration theme, which is fine at the start, I guess, when they are hopeful and they are there to like try and find things they've been looking for their whole lives or whatever. But it'll come back later on after like big bad things have happened, and I'm like, why are you playing a hopeful bit of music here? It's just not fitting. It's not like an emotional theme that fits for the characters and them having moments of hope or anything like that. It's just there because, oh hey, we're doing more like unveiling secrets moments, so we're getting this little brass bit that plays.
Yeah. No, I wasn't paying too much attention to the themes. I was more wrapped up in trying to figure out what in the hell was going on. But yeah, there were definitely points, especially towards the third act, where I was like, this doesn't feel like the right tone musically. And I couldn't put my finger, but I think you're right. This idea that it's like this big, it feels like it's doing a hopeful thing. Meanwhile, what we're seeing on screen is everything falling apart for everybody.
So I think we will just say spoilers, so we can dive into it and start talking about everything. So we're going to work through the movie, more or less. So spoilers for Prometheus, you have been warned. So the movie starts before life began. And an engineer, which is the alien race that are in this movie, right? And seemingly an engineer is what was inside the space jockey. Like that's like the race that's inside that, which is fine. I would have rather never have seen him, honestly.
I was fine with them showing them, but by the time that we get to that point, that when we actually see that him sitting in the space jockey seat, that's what drove into my mind saying like, they wanted to do an Alien prequel, and all the God stuff was the best plot that they could come up with for the Alien prequel. Like that's where it pivoted for me from the God stuff was the focus over to the Alien stuff was the focus, and it just kept bouncing back and forth.
Yeah, but you see like this engineer like release this like black goop into his body, and then it kind of like it basically breaks him down, and it's like all his genetics sort of like spread in the water, the idea being that he's the genesis for all life on Earth,
which I have problems with, primarily the fact that later on in this movie they get a bit of engineered DNA and then they compare it to human DNA and they're like, look, it's the same. This is our destiny, our progeny. I'm like, that's cool. Compare him to fruit flies, please. Because if he's all life on Earth, that means that he should be the same as a slug, right?
I wonder, though, if like this was like a shorthand, but what they actually meant is that the genetic, the genome is like the same genomes that make up human and other Earth life. But yeah, the way they phrase it, it sounds like it's just the identical DNA to humans, which I don't think is what they're actually trying to say, because that'd be weird, because, well, he's very human-like. He's much taller, obviously. He's not human. There's obviously differences, but... Yeah. Then again, we're not scientists, okay? We're just, we're taking what we can here from the movie.
Speak for yourself. I took a 7th grade genetics course.
I mean, what you should have said there is back off, I'm a scientist. You should have quoted Ghostbusters. Come on.
Oh, that's true. You know what? I'll leave. Sorry.
Just since it's fresh in our heads, we just recorded all those not too long ago. So we go to 2089, and they're in Scotland, funnily enough, digging up ruins, and they find a cave painting of a tall figure pointing to some planets in the sky. And which suggests, I guess, that the engineers came back and visited occasionally in the old days.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way that makes any sense, is that they just kept checking in every once in a while, and they were like, hey, by the way, that's a thing, and we're not going to say whether it's good or bad, but that's a thing.
It doesn't really make that much sense, though, because when we find out what this planet is, or this moon is, that they've got these bases on, because I like what it turns out to be in a sort of broad sense, but it doesn't make any sense that they were, like, planting seeds for humans to, like, go looking for it, because why would they care about humans going to find it?
Oh, yeah. It doesn't make any sense at all. Also, it bothers me the fact that, like, it's 6 stars, 6 planets, whatever you want to call it, on a flat plane, and... as they're describing this, these 6 stars in this arrangement have been seen all over all these ancient cultures, like arts and mythology and stuff like that. And so they said, we looked through all of the galaxies, and the only thing that we could find that matches that is in this specific cluster. I'm like, really? All the stars in the sky, and the only 6 that matched up is that tiny little area there. Okay.
Maybe I'm being generous here, but is it possible that some of the drawings that came from different parts of the planet, or well, I suppose this, I don't know. I'm trying to argue that they could triangulate some more data based on the perspective of different places on Earth. That's what I'm trying to argue.
That'd be a great idea, but that's part of what I dislike about the science in this movie, is that it's really complex stuff. But they're dumbing it down enough that it's just like, no, just roll with it. Just, sure, engineer DNA is the same as humans. We don't need to get into the specifics of it. I'm like, okay, but you can't just say something that complex without going a little bit more into it.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning here, like, Damon Lindelof got a lot of shit for this movie because he is one of the writers on it. And it is, I mean, the script is bad. Like, I'm not going to defend it. I feel like his track record with TV is much better, because I think Lost and Leftovers, I think, are both really good TV. I think he's typically quite good at that. And Watchmen as well, actually. Did the Watchmen TV show that was one season. That was very good. Yeah. He clearly has skill and talent at writing certain types of thing. This movie, though, I'm not going to really say much for. I'm just giving him a little shout out for other things that he's done.
Yeah, we do not think that you are a bad creator. You just had a bad creation.
Yes. Same with Ridley Scott, honestly. When Ridley Scott has good movies, he has bad movies. I mentioned earlier that I'm not that fond of Blade Runner, but obviously I love Alien. I like Gladiator a lot. Black Hawk Down's pretty good. The Martian's great. He's made a lot of good movies. He has bad movies kind of sprinkled in between them as well.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, it basically cuts ahead. They're on the ship. Although before they all wake up, they do this thing where David the android is on his own awake, sort of maintaining everything and just sort of chilling out. And they kind of imply when it gets to the stuff where Wayland's his message is playing, that it kind of implies that David is maybe the first of the androids. Like he is, or at least he's like an early version, because the way he describes him is like, oh, he's my creation and like he'll never be human. it doesn't feel like at this point in time these androids are like commonplace and there's one on every ship or anything like that. It kind of sounds like, you know, this is relatively new, early days of the androids in the Alien universe.
Yeah. No, I mean, in the scope of the movie, yes, it feels like this is one of the first go-arounds, and it doesn't feel like there has been, like, to the point where multiple characters are mentioning, be like, oh, right, you don't need to sleep and you don't need to eat, right? That's how this works. So clearly they're not familiar with it to that extent. I will say in the extended materials, the things that were like available on the Blu-rays and the ARGs, he is model number 8 of David. So they have been through 8 generations of this beforehand, but it doesn't say anything about like how widely deployed they were or anything like that.
Yeah, that makes me think though it's more like failed attempts or something. You know, like, you know, it's like the first one could talk, but that was about it. The second one maybe he could walk.
First one was just ChatGPT. That's all it was.
You know, but what I'm saying is that by the time he could actually sort of function, because obviously one of the things going into the Alien itself is this idea that they're stealth, like the people aren't told they're with an android. Whereas this David obviously is not concealing that in any way, shape, or form. So, but yeah, I mean, I think tonally, obviously it makes sense for some of the themes that the movie is going to at least try and play with. But I do remember watching it for the first time and thinking, all this stuff with him on the ship on his own, with like classical music playing over the top of it, felt a little tonally weird, like at the start of an Alien movie. But even the stuff with the engineer before, like I remember thinking, this is weird, seeing this big like alien dude like just stand there and look at his CG stuff in his hand. Like this doesn't feel like an Alien movie. It feels like we're doing something very different, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if it was going to say, no, this is something different, it's in the Alien universe, but we're doing a very different thing. Unfortunately, that's not really what comes to pass as the movie goes on. But there's definitely, there was these red flags early on where even if I wasn't internalizing it and thinking, oh, this is going to suck now, just little feelings of, that doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's the question of, the first movie was the only movie you would really have of without the connection to the prior movie, because we were just following Ripley the whole way through. So if you aren't following Ripley, do you start it the same as the first one, or do you go for something like completely different and changed up? And I'm not saying they chose wrong, but it does feel like it's setting up for something that is completely separate from Alien as a franchise rather than a prequel to it.
I will say, even for this movie's own terms, like the themes that it's playing with of looking for our creators, if that's indeed what they are, I think showing us an engineer being the start of life on Earth, actually seeing that at the start of the movie,
that's fair.
I think that's a bad idea. I think that ruins the mystery of it. I think we shouldn't have seen what an engineer looked like until they did later in the movie. I think that was just a bad move. Because it's one thing to introduce this wildly new fantastical visual element of seeing like a humanoid alien in the Alien universe. But if you build up to it and it's like a big crescendo to it where, hey, this is a big deal, we're showing this, that can be something. But if you just blow your load in the very first scene, it's the first thing we see, it's kind of like, oh, this is weird. I'm like, oh, I've got load in my face. I don't like this. You know, like...
Oh, God, who put that there?
So, you know, I do think even on its own terms, that opening scene is a mistake. But
yeah, I could agree with that. I mean, I if we opened with the second scene, or at least like the sweeping vistas of Scotland, I'm presuming, I think that would, I think that would be okay, but it still wouldn't have felt like an Alien movie. Honestly, I feel like for me to feel like it's an Alien movie, you need to start in space on the ship on its way there.
I think, and I think the thing, obviously you can subvert things and do something different, but David being awake and doing what he's doing would be the different thing, right? Like maybe you sort of started just like Alien, you have lots of shots around the ship, no one's there, you see the cryopods, they're all asleep, but instead of them waking up, you just see him walking past the camera, and then you start following him for his montage, and it's like, oh hey, that's the subversion. It's like, okay, we're doing an Alien thing, but the android's just awake doing stuff. That's different, and then you go from there. Maybe that's how you do it.
I mean, I'd be fine with that. I do think that the next little bit in the sequence, though, might be my least favorite scene in the movie, just because of, by the time it's done, how much it stands out, which is David is watching the dreams of Shaw, and we get to see it as well in this weird pointillism style of it's a memory sequence. It's a flashback used to flesh out the character of Shaw, but like
Patrick Wilson gets a cameo as her dad just in this little flashback.
But it's so unnecessary and it's so out of place in the whole sequence that I genuinely don't understand why it was in this.
I mean, it's obviously showing that he's obsessed with the humans, but I think the other thing that we see him do, which is not as like silly and fantastical, because I mean, this is like they have tech to just tap into people's dreams. That feels like a big deal. We should focus on that maybe, and not just have it be a throwaway thing. But there's a scene of him watching. I want to say it's Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. I think that's the movie. But he's watching the movie and he's like clearly into it, and he starts like styling his hair just like the actor in the movie, right? And we see him do it, and he's quoting lines from it, and I'm like, oh, this is showing that he's learning more about humans and that he's kind of like obsessed, maybe not in a bad way, but just that he is fascinated by them. He's idolizing.
He wants to know more about his creators.
Sure, yeah, that's obviously what they're getting at, and he's like into it. Like that at least felt like, and I was thinking about this as I was watching it as well, is I'm like, this isn't a cheap reference, because this is obviously they're showing a real movie here. But one, it's not a movie that's tied to Alien in any way, so it's not like a cheap pop where it's not like someone in the audience is like, oh yeah, I love this old movie. Like, it's got a purpose because it's showing that it's telling us something about him by using it to do it. So it's purpose first, and if anyone does get a little cheap, like, hey, nostalgia, because I know that movie, that's a little bonus, that's a little icing on the cake, but that's not the main point of it, as opposed to, we're going to have the Stay Puft Marshmallows show up or whatever your nostalgia beat is. So
Ghostbusters is on the mind, people.
Yeah. Frozen Empire's out in like 5 days at the time of recording this, so it's fresh in the head. But yeah, so we get all this stuff with him, and then obviously the computer goes off, and it's like, hey, we've arrived at our destination. So and we're introduced, and this is the thing, they give Charlize Theron's character, right, the person in charge of the ship, they give her this introduction, which does tell us something about her, right? Because David goes to the cryopods, and hers is already open. She's somehow so, like, regimented, she's so strict on herself, and she's, like, raring to go, that she's already doing push-ups, right? It's this idea that, even in Aliens, we saw all the military guys, they weren't all up like that. They were still groggy and getting up and being like, F this, blah, 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 whatever. But she's already doing push-ups, and she's giving out orders, David's following them, and she's like, wake them up. And I'm like, okay, this feels like you've just introduced a character. It feels like you've given me a sense of like part of her personality. I couldn't believe how little we actually did with her.
Right.
She gets a bigger introduction than Shaw does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, we get this huge thing with her. She's the very first real person that we're introduced to over, like, obviously the Scotland scene happened, but this is the first thing in space on the mission. And then she is just essentially like, I guess you would view her as the antagonist if you disavow all of the actual aliens in the movie. But even then, she's barely that. She's barely putting up a fight to our main characters.
She is so off camera. Like, like it's not like she's constantly there throwing her weight around. And part of it's because she's not even like that interested in what they're doing. She basically just thinks this is all a waste of time. So she's just kind of here to babysit them, and she just doesn't interact with them that much, right?
Yeah.
And until some key moments where she does, but then by that point, it just kind of feels like, I don't care about you. Like in Aliens, you hate Paul Reiser's character. When you start seeing the shit he's up to, you're like, oh, you're a slime ball. Like, you're with Ripley when she hates him. You're like so invested in what's happening with that dispute. Here, I just could not give less of a shit.
Well, I think it's also an interesting idea because if you look back to Aliens, obviously Ripley's the one saying like, no, we can't go on this mission because it's going to be too dangerous. Everything's going to be, we're all going to die. And Paul Reiser's character is the one who's saying, like, no, we need to go in, but he's going in for nefarious means. He's going in for the company reason.
A percentage.
Yeah. So you have a reluctant hero and then a villain who's forcing things along. This movie essentially has the opposite, where you have a hero who is balls to the wall wanting to see what's going on, and the villain is saying, no, stop the movie.
Which,
I want to get off.
Which I don't even necessarily think is bad in a vacuum. Like, I can see that, again, that being a subversion of, like, okay, maybe not from the antagonist, but at least for Shaw versus Ripley, that's the difference in the protagonist. The protagonist here is an explorer who wants to find this stuff because she really believes in it, and she wants to, figure out who created the human being. She's a very faithful character. She's wearing her dad's cross. That's brought up a few times throughout the movie. Although, to be honest, I feel like I'll be able to do enough with that to justify even bringing religion into the whole idea.
Yeah.
But, like, on paper, I can see the idea there of having a protagonist. We've got another potentially strong female character, but we're going to have her be the opposite type of character to Ripley in terms of her function. Like, she wants to be there, she wants to explore and discover things, and she's arguably not scared enough, right? That's potentially interesting to have an alien movie where it's someone jumping in head first. Because ultimately, Ripley didn't really want to go and explore an alien. She was like trying to talk them out of it, and she ends up, she doesn't want to let them in. It's funny actually, later in this movie, Charlize Theron's the one saying, don't let the infected guy on board. And in the original movie, Ripley's that person, and she's right. And honestly, after living through a pandemic, Ripley was right.
I mean, I agree and disagree, only because the first movie it was a mining crew. It was like, they didn't have the ability to quarantine properly here. I feel like this ship should have that ability. Maybe they don't, but from everything I see, I feel like they should have had the medical ability to quarantine properly.
Yeah. I don't think Charlize Theron's character, though, is a scientist herself. I think she's just a businesswoman.
Yeah, probably.
So she's not risking it, which is, fair enough, I guess. So yeah, they land. They get to the planet. They land near some structures which don't look natural. They look like they've been made by some form of intelligent life, which is fair play. Makes a lot of sense. They have like a sort of briefing scene before they land as well, and this hurt a little bit watching this, especially if you've watched Aliens any time recently, because Aliens really is the masterclass in how you do an ensemble group. And they've got that scene in Aliens where it's like, hey, here's the briefing. We get a little taste of who a lot of the characters are. And we got some at the breakfast scene before as well when they were waking up, sure. It's not just that scene. But that's the scene where Ripley has to talk to them and they're all skeptical of her, right? And she's nervous to talk to them because, she's not military. She feels out of place. She feels like the odd one out. Here, we have this hologram of Wayland saying, hey, I'll be dead by now by the time you get there, but I funded this mission because these two people here are two main, a couple, Shaw and Charlie, and they get up and they explain why they're here, and the crowd are skeptical, right? When they say, hey, you got these cave paintings, so you were out here because it's a map, blah blah blah. Which honestly, even that alone, I think is enough to warrant some exploration. That there was like all this stuff that predates any technology that would have let these primitive humans see this was in the sky. That begs at least some, whatever we're going to find. Obviously, Shaw does sound a little bit more hardcore when she's like, oh, we call them engineers because the engineer does. It's like, okay, that's a little bit more like devout and harder to swallow, but
I mean, my part of the scene that gets me though is how they just brush over the biologist character. She says like, oh yeah, the engineers, they engineered us. And he's like, hi, hey, yeah, me. Darwinism, that's a thing that like we all know is true, and they just are just like, yeah, okay, but like never mind that, we're talking about aliens now.
Do you know what I think bugs me about that especially is that I feel like there is an answer that makes sense, which is like, well, we're not saying that engineered human beings in isolation, we're saying that all life on Earth has come from their seed, right?
Yeah.
And that's, that's what, so Darwinism's still a thing. Like all of that still applies. It's just that it all comes back to this starting point.
I would even take the idea that like, because obviously as we were showing, they came back regularly. They came back to these different societies. I'd be fine with them saying, yeah, Darwinism's a thing, but like they're the guiding hand. They are the ones who are like, they're trying to push us in a certain direction. And when Darwinism starts getting like the other way, they come in and they're like, like let's move towards technology. Go that way.
Or maybe we've been rebooted a few times and like we're actually humans 3.0. Like,
Exactly.
There's been other failures before us kind of thing.
I remember an old sitcom called Dinosaurs.
Yes. Yes.
That was 1.0. And then the engineers came.
Well, yeah, that just begs the question: is this engineer scene before life, was that like pre-dinosaur, or is that just in between dinosaur and like the time of the mammals?
The fact that it shows the DNA in the water implies that will then evolve into the first life cells, which would be way pre-dinosaur.
I would agree. That's what it seems like based on that scene. But that would mean that humans themselves are like they're quite far down the chain from that. You know, like, we've got a lot to go through before human beings are a thing.
Just like a billion years, whatever. Who cares?
So yeah, but like I say, this scene kind of hurt me just because I felt like it did such a poor job of, like, they've got like an antagonist guy, is this ginger guy with a beard who is just being a dick. Like every single line he has just sounds a little aggressive, just because he has to be that character, and I'm like, it's missing like this sense of camaraderie. Like, do the crew of this ship not know each other? It doesn't sound like they do. It sounds like most of them don't know each other.
Yeah, they have I don't know why I'm blanking on her name. Vickers, Charlize Theron's character.
Yeah.
They have her specifically say like, look, some of you I hired on personally. You know about me. How's it going? But then she says to the rest of the crew, which implies that there's a Wayland corporate team, and then there's a ship team. And I think that's where the division comes in of like who knows who. But
would it not have like maybe made us like the characters a bit more if maybe one of the people that the main couple didn't know became friends with them or something? Like maybe they actually bond with someone over the course of the movie.
It would be great if the main couple or anybody spoke outside of their groups. Like we have the two captain like ish characters, the people piloting the ship, talk together. We have the biologist and the angry guy talk together. We have Vickers and the captain talk together, and we have our main couple talk together. And then David's the only one who's able to kind of like float between and talk to other people, but everyone else is limited to their pair.
And I get that it's a different group and you can't necessarily have it be the same way, but remember back to Alien, right? How they literally like all have breakfast together, and that's kind of like them all interacting. They clearly all know each other. And it implies like these past histories where they know that, you know, Harry Dean Stanton's always trying to con out more money out of the company. So he's like, shut up, you're full of shit. Yeah. Like there's this like sense of like knowledge about each other. And even in Aliens, where there are some outsiders that aren't part of the military team, we see how over the course of the movie, Ripley interacts with them and gains some respect from some of them. And, you know, like I feel like this movie is just a complete failure when it comes to how to handle an ensemble cast and giving them all something and making them, and I think it is making them interact with each other and making little bonds form there. I feel like maybe they were kind of going for that with the ginger guy in Milburn, who's Rafe Spall's character, because their first interaction, the very quick snippet we get of them having breakfast, which is such a big part of those previous, I never even thought about this before, but it's such a big part of Alien and Aliens is that we have scenes where they talk over a meal after they wake up. It's like a big part of both movies. We get a brief snippet where Rafe Spall's character sits down with the ginger guy, and the ginger guy says, I'm not here to have friends, I'm here to make money. And I'm like, but do you make more money by being a dick to everyone else? Because I feel like you'd probably be more efficient and make more money if you were working with the others.
I mean, you'd think so, but yeah.
They're not out here competing. It's not a competition. But that felt like it was okay. It's supposed to start like a thread between those two. Because typically one of the things you do when you have an ensemble cast, and Aliens did this so well, is that you have a lot of little mini arcs between different pairs of characters. So in Aliens, you have like a little arc between Hudson and the girl, for example, Newt, right? There's a whole little bit where he's getting scared and she's acting more brave, and he kind of criticizes that. And there's a little moment that pays that off later when he kind of protects her a little bit. Likewise, you have Vasquez being really critical of Gorman because he's like a rookie and doesn't know what he's doing. But they have like a big payoff to that later in the movie where they kind of be brave together. Like he's brave for the first time with her towards the end of his story. So like they have all these like setups and payoffs between all these different pairs of characters on top of whatever the main thing going on is. And I felt like this was an attempt to do this with these two because they end up together for like a chunk of the movie, in the not too distant future. But it never feels like they start to, I don't know, like bond or like each other or...
No, it's purely out of convenience to the plot. They're like, everyone else is required to be elsewhere. These are the only two characters we can spare, and therefore we're just going to string them together as long as we can.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel like it fails completely as a character ensemble movie, and it is hard to do. I'm not saying this is it. Many movies have failed or only done a half decent job at this. It does take a good skilled writer to make this work, but it is something that sticks out here because these Alien movies have been ensembles.
Right.
You know, both Alien and Aliens are that, and this is an Alien movie. It's a group of characters on a ship. It's impossible not to compare them, but even without comparing and saying, oh, it should be as good as these things because they're related, just on its own merits, it needs more because I don't care about any of them. There's a reason why that was an important part of both these movies, and this one's lacking that. So
yeah,
I think it's important to criticize that here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so they're on the planet. They go looking into the structure. That's the next part here.
Big dome out in the middle of the desert, and like, I love the fact that they specifically say like, oh, these lines, they're all straight lines. That implies it's not natural. And I'm like, bro, there's a giant hollowed out pile of dirt over there, and you're going to tell me that's natural? Clearly that's man-made.
Yeah, well, he kind of implied that when they were landing, because he says, oh, God doesn't build in straight lines. And I thought that was fine. But then as they were getting closer to it and they were scanning something, yeah, there's another line that was like, yeah, this is starting to look like this is definitely man-made of some kind. And I'm like, well, obviously, there's like multiple structures that look the exact same in a line. Of course this has been made by someone.
Exactly. And again, that just goes back to what I was saying of, I feel like everything was just so dumbed down for the audience. Like, they have these complex questions they want to answer, but they're like, yeah, but like, you guys came for alien space fights, so we are going to assume you have the IQ of about a rock.
But anyway, they get in their buggies and their little truck. They mention that, you know, the air's got oxygen in it, but the levels are a bit wonky, so you could maybe survive for like 2 minutes, but you'll die if you don't have a suit.
Yeah, it's like too high of carbon dioxide, but everything else is perfectly air, like Earth air.
Yeah, so, but they go out in their suits, they go to the dome, and they go inside. They've got these fancy, like, phantasm balls that are like scanners that go flying down all the hallways. And that's the thing, is you see them as they're building out this tunnel. I'm like, oh, that's starting to look like the ship from Alien, because it's like a sort of U-shape. And I'm like, okay, I see what they're doing here. But while we're in there, they find various things. They find, obviously, this hologram, like, it's like a sort of playback thing that happens sort of by accident.
Yeah, they find text on the wall, and they'll tell David, because David's whole purpose here is that he spent all of his time as they were flying up studying like Indo languages that like were theoretically something that the engineers would be able to understand in order to communicate with. And so he finds text on the wall, but it turns out the text is actually buttons. And then he just starts poking at it, and it activates like you said, a hologram replay system where it shows it's the engineers, but it's the space jockeys, with the masks and everything. Yeah,
there's like a group of space jockeys running away from something. And like, okay, this is a good tease potentially, because like, okay, they had some kind of alien creature probably that's gotten out of hand, and they're making a run for it. And they follow the hologram, and like the one hologram body kind of like trips, and seemingly this door that comes down has like crushed its head or cut its head off. So they actually get to this like body without a head, and they're like, hey, it's one of these things. Like, what is this? And they start poking at it and taking readings, and they're like, this is 2,000 years. This has been lying here, kind of thing. And then David does some more, dabbing on the buttons, and opens the door, and they get the head, but they also get this big statue head of an engineer, this big face is at the back of the room. They talk about these paintings that are on the ceiling, but there's also like some carvings on one of the walls, which does have something that looks kind of xenomorph on it. It's not quite exactly xenomorph, but it's just kind of left of xenomorph. Yeah. So,
and then throughout the room, there are all these little like, I don't know, basically like vases. That
I'd probably say urns. They look kind of urn shaped to me.
Yeah, that's fair. But they all have this black goop that apparently this room was like pressurized or climate controlled or something. And when they opened it up, this black goop started like seeping out of all the urns.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because it's not doing it at first. Like you only see it a little bit in this scene, but it's when the other characters come back in this room later, you see that it's like they're bleeding this black goo, and it's all running down the sides. And it's like, okay. So this is probably a good place for me to bring in what Ridley Scott said on the old 1999 Alien commentary track. So over a decade before this movie was made. He said on that track that he believed that the aliens, the xenomorph, the eggs, that they were cargo on a ship, right? Whoever the space jockey's race is, they were cargo on that ship, and that they were a weapon of mass destruction. And that was always a cool idea. And I still think that is a good idea for what the aliens are. The idea that this other alien race was using them as like a planet-wiping like organism. Like if we just drop some xenomorphs onto a planet, they'll wipe it out. Eventually they'll just take over the whole planet, and it'll just be a, so that's really fun idea. And I do like when the characters in this movie kind of like figure out parts of this and say, oh, this is like I think it's Idris Elba later on says, oh, this is on this barren moon because this is a weapon of mass destruction. They don't want this where they live because they're not idiots.
This isn't their home world. This is a military installation.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. It's like one of the few things they say in this movie about what's going on where I'm like, that's actually a really cool idea. That works with everything else. Again, I don't think we need a whole movie talking about all this stuff. I think just getting some little hints of these things in another like Alien movie would have been fine.
Yeah.
Because, leave some of it open. Like, I think when you actually see these big alien dudes walking around and, like, pressing buttons and, like, going into their seats and stuff, it's like, you're sort of taking a lot of the mystique out of it. You're just kind of showing me everything now, as opposed to, like, so. Well,
that's one thing I expected Lindelof would especially know, is that from his time, like, writing on Lost and whatnot, is the moment you answer all the questions is the moment people stop caring. And the more and more they fill out the backstory and say, like, here is exactly when the aliens were made, here's exactly the purpose they were made for, here is the beginning of their life cycle and their progenitors, it's like, well, guess I'm done with that now.
Yeah, I do genuinely really like the core idea that the aliens, the xenomorph, is a weapon of mass destruction. And that's what their purpose is. And that presumably the ship from Alien crashed unplanned, and that's just where they found them, and that's how the alien, spirals from there. I think that's a great idea. I think this movie later on, once David like finds the main room where the eventual space jockey cannon comes out, you can sort of tell it's that room even before it happens, but he's in that room and he starts playing with the computer and he sees a bunch of shit. We get to this realization that they were planning to go to Earth with all this stuff. These urns with all the goo were destined for Earth, and it's only because this disaster happened 2,000 years ago that they never came and wiped out all life on Earth.
All right.
That's a step too far. I'm just going to say that. I think that's too much.
I'm going to take it a step further.
Go on.
Based off the implications of that and something that Ridley Scott said in some back matter stuff. That was 2,000 years ago. That for some reason, the engineers, and it's not told in this movie why, but the engineers got so pissed at us that they decided, screw this, we're going to destroy the whole planet. What happened 2,000 years ago, theoretically, in human history? About the year 0.
Well, theoretically, one would assume that they're saying Jesus is canon here.
Ridley Scott said that an idea that was not put in the movie, so it is not canon, but an idea was the engineers kept revisiting over and over again. And one time an engineer came down and we crucified him. So the engineers were so pissed off that we killed Jesus Christ the engineer that they came and they said, screw you, we're bombing your planet with alien eggs.
I'm just picturing one of these engineers with the long hair and the sandals. And
turns out Jesus really was white. Who would have thought?
Okay, well, there's a reason why that didn't make it into anything.
Yes.
But
they do still have that 2,000 years reference, and they don't answer the question as to what we did that pissed off the engineers so much.
No, I don't think you need to answer it. I don't think it is a question. You say that as if we need to have an answer to that. I don't think it is. I think the implication, again, not knowing any of these ideas that were never put in, the implication from the movie that I got was just that, like, we were a science experiment, and they've decided that, every so often, I think the line at one point is, well, to create more, you have to destroy what's already there. It's like, oh no, they've just got like a new thing they want to try. They want to try a new set of DNA. They want to try something else. So
we've got a good planet with a good atmosphere that's going on.
It's just about wiping us. I don't think it's about us doing something that made us wanting to kill us. It's just.
I mean, that makes sense, and I'm fine with that as a story point. But to say that the movie itself wasn't asking that, I think that's Shaw directly asks that. Shaw directly, her entire character motivation is, tell me why you hated us so much that you were going to kill us with this stuff. So it is something that the movie is expecting you to at least think about, but they never give the full answer for.
Well, it is, but they do kind of give you... Damn cat. It is, but... I think what you're overlooking here is that they thematically do give you some things to think about with that. I think the question at the end, Shaw's asking, well, like, why did they change their mind and wanting to destroy us? But I think the seeds are in the movie to suggest whether or not we should give a shit. And David himself, when he's talking to Charlie, her husband, like, this is after the first expedition, they're back on the ship, and David's getting all weird because he took one of the urns and he's like been testing, and this is where he chooses to infect Charlie with it, which we'll talk about. But he's like, hey, why, Charlie's upset because he was hoping to find an engineer alive because he wanted to ask him questions, and David's like, you're disappointed. He's like, well, why did you make me? Like, human beings made me. Why did you make me? And he's like, because we could, and just kind of shrugs it off. And he's like, well, would you be disappointed if your creator said that to you? And he doesn't really give an answer, but clearly I think he would be upset if that was the response.
Yeah.
I think, to me, by the end of the movie, and we're kind of skipping around here, but by the end of the movie, when she's at saying those things in the final couple scenes, and David's like, why, does it matter? Why do you have to know? I felt like that the point is that there is no like good reason. There is no... They don't care about humans. They don't care about their creation. They are just an experiment, or they are just a test or something.
Yeah.
And there is no good answer. There's never going to be a satisfying answer that she can understand. It's going to be just as disappointing as when Charlie said to David, because we could. There's no other like greater reason for it than that.
No, I agree with that. I agree wholesale that I think that's what the point of it is in the end. But I also feel like the movie doesn't go far enough of establishing that as like the central theme or the idea that it wants to impart to you. I think that by the time...
it doesn't do a good job of setting up any central things.
Right. I mean, so what, I'm supposed to give it a pass? No, I think that if that's the idea, because like we said, most of this plot is bouncing between the idea of the relationship between a creator and the creation. And we get to see how David interacts with Wayland Yutani and stuff like that. We get to see how the engineers interact with the humans. But I think that they never really give a satisfying answer for those plots in any regard. And as much as I agree with the ending scene leaves you with that idea that there is no satisfying answer here, so we're just going to keep on searching for more and more and more, it doesn't do enough with that. It doesn't impart the audience with that as a thought they're supposed to be thinking.
I don't disagree with everything you just said, but I equally don't think it sets up the question enough that we're sitting going, oh, what is the reason? I don't think it matters. I don't think the movie ever makes it feel like
That's
it's
fair.
important that it matters.
Honestly, I was sitting with this probably like 20 minutes after the movie and just trying to figure out what I was supposed to be feeling. And I think I might have extrapolated that.
And another big problem for me with that scene at the end, where it's just Shaw and David, is he says, does it matter why they chose this or why they don't care about you anymore? And she goes, yeah, it does. And maybe that's why I'm a human being. And that's what makes you a robot. And that really irked me, that little exchange, because my thought was, but hey, Shaw, here's a problem with that little line of dialogue. I'm a human being and I don't give a shit. I don't care. I've never cared who created human beings. I don't care what the answers of the meaning of life is. This is stupid, right? Yeah. And I get that she is supposed to be a religious character, so she does care, and that's maybe why she is. But it just, like, I'm not going to say I was offended by the notion that it's human being to care, but I do not care. And it's the same with Charlie, actually. When Charlie's, like, upset and he's drinking and he's talking to David and he's upset because, oh, the injuries are dead. I wanted to ask my creator some questions. And all I'm like, I don't care. I've never cared about like who created life. I just don't give a shit.
I think that this could have gone a lot better in the in this, like how the movie flowed, if we gave a lot more focus on David knowing who his creator is. Like, he knows exactly where he came from. He knows exactly his purpose, but I don't feel like we ever actually get that much focus. There's maybe, I would say, 2 conversations in the whole movie where we actually get like a philosophical thing of how does David feel about the fact that we're looking for our creators while his is a famous businessman that everyone knows.
Yeah, there could be more contrast with that. And that actually could be a more interesting thing to do with David as a character if his purpose is to teach the humans that it doesn't matter because it's, you know, like ultimately he's not defined maybe by the end of the story, like who his creators made him to be. And the fact that he's already kind of doing things for himself implies that he is kind of like went beyond just what his programming is. But but the movie's not interested in doing that because the movie just wants him to be creepy because David is creepy the entire movie. He is like, he might do something bad at any point. He's doing the creepy smile. Like, that's all the movie really wants him to be. So instead of actually using him to add to those key themes, obviously in a broad sense it's there because he brings up the fact that he knows his creator once or twice. He is obviously a creation of humans, but they could be doing way more with that. Like there's like almost a happier version of the scene with him, instead of him using the goo to infect Charlie just to see what it does, because that's what he does. He just does it for curiosity's sake, and that feeds into the whole he just did it because he could, because he wants to see what will happen. There's like a happier version of that scene, and I'm not saying it would fit in an Alien movie per se, but just going with these ideas, there's this version of that scene where he actually finds a way to comfort Charlie and like sort of make it clear that he's like not satisfied with knowing his creator, so maybe he wouldn't be either, or there's something to that. Like, do something with it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I do think they do play up an interesting angle with David in that he is, as we see in a slightly later scene, he is the one person who's able to like go. He's able to interact with the engineers. He knows how their technology works, and he's able to lead the humans there. So it is actually an interesting prospect, the fact that the engineers made the humans, and then the humans made David, and David is on the same level as the engineers. So it's almost this like rock, paper, scissors-esque thing where it's not like a chain downwards of knowing your creator. It's eventually you overcome your own creators and can become something more than what you were originally designed by. I think it's the same thing with the xenomorphs, obviously, is that the engineers, to some extent, designed the xenomorphs to be world enders, but they were able to be killed by them themselves.
We'll return to that conversation after Covenant. There's things to
Great.
say about who created the aliens.
Great. Can't wait.
Oh, I'm giddy just thinking about how bad that movie is. I think the other, just to go back to one of those points I made there about having trouble just accepting like the character's like desire to meet their maker, and just having a problem with that as a blanket motivation. Not just because I don't relate to it, but I think I'd be fine with it if like the character was given enough like in the story to make me understand why they care about it. But they don't. It's used pretty much as a crutch of just being like, no, of course everyone should care about this, so therefore we don't have to question why she's so devoutly like obsessed with the question of who the creators are, both her and Charlie to an extent, but obviously by the end it's her making this big choice to not go back to Earth but instead go looking for the engineered homeworld. And that decision at the end of the movie just feels so weird to me and just unsatisfying. Like, I don't feel like it resolves anything. I don't feel like it's like a fun cliffhanger.
It feels like sequel bait.
It does feel like sequel bait. Which, David, I'm just going to tell you this right now.
Okay.
The next movie is not about that.
I'm not surprised.
Like, it does get addressed. It is brought up.
Okay.
But it's a small part.
All right, that's fine. I mean, to be fair, when I knew how Prometheus was received and how it wasn't that big of an impact, I figured that any plans for following up on that were immediately going to be minimized or scrapped entirely. So
no, it's actually just more of the same problem where the studio said you have to call the next one Alien. So the next one's called Alien Covenant. So it's more
because
directly...
that was the problem.
Yeah.
Nobody knew that this was an alien movie.
And there has to be actual xenomorphs in it. So there's actual xenomorphs in it. But it still has that same problem where it's kind of butting heads with what the story was supposed to be or what they wanted it to be. So frustrating.
We'll get there.
Anyway, so to go back to where we were in the movie, I know we jumped to some bigger topics, but
Charlie has sex.
Well, we weren't quite there yet because they were snooping around because the two guys split from them because they got scared of what they were seeing.
Right. Yep.
So they end up trapped in there while the storm's outside. So there's a whole set piece where they're all racing back to the ship on the buggies. And Shaw puts herself in danger to make sure she keeps the alien head. And this is where I was talking about earlier, where the movie really slowing down again, because it feels like once we get to this point, Charlie all of a sudden is drinking heavily, like he's really upset by something, which I didn't feel like they set up properly at all.
The only line they gave him was as he was standing in the room with all the urns, he said, "It's just another tomb."
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the only thing he says.
Even before that, though, they should have really set up this idea that he wants to meet them. It's not just about... Because I'm like, of course it's another tomb. What were you expecting, to just walk in them having dinner?
Yeah. Oh, hi. I'm Mr. Engineer. Here's my wife, Mrs. Engineer.
Do you know what's so funny about it, though, is that it almost mirrors the feeling of the audience. It's like, oh, we're going to get an alien movie. They're going to this moon where alien stuff's going to happen. Oh, it's just another tease. Yeah. We're not there yet. It's just another tease.
As it turns out, the moment you land on 223, it's just disappointing for everybody.
So they get back. They're doing tests on the head. The head ends up exploding when they try and they put some electricity into it or something to try and make it react.
Yeah, what mad science bullshit was this? Where they're like, oh, I think we can get something to happen if we just do a Frankenstein, shove some electrodes into a spinal column and pump the amperage up. And they're right, something does happen, but where the hell did they get that idea?
Also, we've actually completely glossed over something else. When they're looking around in the dome, right, and they're finding the urns and whatnot, at one point they go, hey, the air is a lot more breathable here because there's some terraforming stuff. And immediately, Charlie's like, F this, I'm taking this helmet off. And I'm like, just because it's breathable doesn't mean there's not other dangerous things in the atmosphere.
I'm fine with Charlie doing it. I'm even fine with Shaw following his lead. But the fact that every member of the science team is like, oh, okay. No, somebody should have the abundance of caution to say, oh, wait, this is a stupid idea.
And the reason why I thought of that there when I did is because I was thinking the same thing when they were doing all this stuff with the head. I'm like, why? Because they've got masks, but they're just sort of underneath their chin. It's just like goddamn COVID again, where people weren't in their masks properly. And I'm like, you're prodding an alien thing that has who knows what bacteria that human beings have never encountered before, and it was maddening, absolutely maddening.
Yeah, you're right. This has absolutely, and the best part is it's the lab setting, and you have the two scientists working there. Obviously, they're scrubbed up, they're ready to go. You got David there; he's a cyborg. I can take fine, whatever. He's in there, but you also have Charlie just sitting in the corner with a flask in his hand. I'm like, dude, get out of here. What are you even doing in this room?
You say flask, but it was a bottle of wine. However, it was a metal bottle of wine.
Right.
Which I think had something to do with space travel or something. Yeah, they all have to be metal. But it was a chrome bottle of wine just to be weird.
But he's just sitting there. That's like me just sitting there with my phone playing some games in a surgery operation center. Be like, don't mind me. I'm just going to watch.
I think one of the other problems with the characters here is that it's like Shaw never even gives him a glance to notice that he's really upset about something. She just ignores him and gets on with things, and I'm like, surely they should she should notice that he's in a bad mood, and maybe it's a character beat that she either ignores that or tries to deal with it in the moment. But until they actually have their sit down conversation, because they're back in the room and a lot of stuff's happened by that point, it feels like they never affect each other during any of these scenes. He's getting drunk because he's depressed, and she never even glances over and goes, oh, I can't deal with that because this is actually really important. Because that would at least be a choice. She'd have made a choice there, and it's okay, that says something about how she's feeling in the moment. But it just never affects. Like we said, a lot of the characters just never really affect each other. They barely interact at points. It's really weird.
No, I did not feel that these two were in love. The very first thing that we saw between them was they find the cave paintings and they hold hands. And obviously that's implying that they get some sort of relationship as we get on the ship, but they kept on saying it was happening, and when bad things started happening to Charlie, Shaw was reacting properly, but I never got the feeling of intimacy between these two, or chemistry, I guess is even the better way to say it.
Yes. I mean, they are scientists.
Yeah. You'd think they'd figure out how to
have chemistry.
Make a love potion at this point in the future, but no.
Yeah, and this is the scene we were sort of joking about earlier, where he's just like, he's babbling on about he thought he'd meet the creators, he thought he'd meet the engineers, and like it turns out making life's not that big, because this is after the conversation with David, where David's like, and put a bit of that black goo in a drink. So David, which I feel like the movie never even like makes that feel like a big deal, that David's already at this place where he's willing to experiment on the humans, because he like,
oh no,
like it feels like that should be a thing where David's been subordinate this whole time, and it should be a big character moment that he's making the choice to do something nefarious to a human. But it never even, it feels, well, it feels like he's like that the whole time. It's like he's just always creepy. So
yeah, they specifically show the point where he's talking to somebody. Spoilers, it's Wayland. Wayland is on the ship. He's alive, like whatever.
Yeah, he's got his like headset on and he's talking to someone, yeah.
Yeah, but he's talking to someone, and they have him meet up with Vickers, and Vickers is like, what did he say? What did he say? And eventually David reveals, like, do more, or like keep going, or something like that. Basically giving him permission to do these experiments on normal human people. Yeah,
it's Vickers, because Vickers also knows he's there, because Vickers, spoilers, is his daughter, and is upset that she's not getting to talk to him.
Yeah. I swear to God, if the only way that you can reveal that a character is related to another character is by having them dramatically pause and then go, "Father," just don't even bother with it.
Honestly, the way she was touching his hand when she said that, I was like, this is, I mean, not this viewing, obviously, but this is 50-50, either father or older lover. Like, it's one of the two, and I'm not actually sure what it's going to be until she said it.
I'm in your will, right? You're going to leave me the entire company as your wife, right?
Yeah, so, yeah, like I say, like he's sitting, going on about how it turns out creating life's not that big a deal. I mean, we did it. David exists. Like, you know, like, it's not a big deal. And then Shaw gets all serious and is like, I can't create life. What does that say about me? And I'm like, okay, that is such a forced pivot, because that's clearly not what he was talking about. He's not talking about children. Yeah. He's not talking about procreation. He's talking about designing and engineering life from scratch. That's what he's talking about. There is a big difference. And then obviously he's like, oh no, I didn't mean that. And they have this intimate thing. They end up having sex. But it's so forced.
I'm fine with her having some level of trauma regarding the fact that she's unable to have kids. The problem that I have with it is that this is only existing so that when we get like 3 scenes later and she is impregnated with an alien, that we can have the line of her being like, but that's impossible. And at no other point in this movie does it matter at all that she doesn't have kids or can't have kids.
Here's the thing. Does it matter that she couldn't, though? Does it actually change anything meaningful? Like,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it doesn't.
Because within seconds, David's like, oh, you're 3 months pregnant. That alone is already weird. Like, we already know it's unnatural at that point, because it's impossible that she's 3 months pregnant. It was the day before, which, given the life cycle of the alien back in, you know, the original movies, it makes sense that if this is some way tangentially connected to such a thing, that it would be a quick thing. So, yeah, it doesn't add anything to it. And not to mention the fact that we already have technically some trauma introduced for her, which is like getting over the death of her father, who was killed with Ebola. But they do so little with that tacking on this, oh, she's also got like a trauma because she can't like naturally give birth. She can't, you know, be a mother in the traditional sense. It feels like you've not even fleshed out the previous trauma that you've given her. Like, you've barely done anything with that. So, I don't know, it feels like just a hat on a hat without giving it any weight or merit. It just, I don't know, it felt so forced to me in the scene. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Somewhere in here, I feel like it's around this time, is where we get glimpses of the two that were left inside of the caves during the storm.
Yeah, it's Rafe Spall and the Ginger, yeah.
Yeah, so just to very quickly wrap up their plot, they are just roaming the hallways. Eventually they come across a pile of dead space jockeys, and they're freaking out about that. Like, what in the hell's going on here? Idris Elba calls over and says, hey, one of our little scanner things recognizes that there's life down some other hallway. Go check it out. It's to the west. And they're like, screw that. We're going east. And then they make their way back into the room with all the urns. And we find a proto face hugger. Is that safe to say?
Oh, no.
No?
No, because
it's called a hammerpede in the actual lore, but it seems like a proto face hugger.
No, I disagree. The thing that Shaw gives birth to is a proto face hugger.
Oh, okay. See, I thought this one, because like we have the biologist come up in the goop, and his like the thing opens up. Like they have the thing open up.
That thing she gives birth to is just a big face hugger. That's what it is.
I mean, yes, it is, but like it feels much more separated than this one.
I don't agree with that. This is just a monster that attacks him and just goes in.
I mean, but it's
him.
A monster that attacks him. It wraps up around his arm and then it embeds itself down his throat. That feels very face huggery to me.
No, but it's not hugging him. It just goes in. The whole thing goes in.
Right. No, I'm just saying the different properties of it. Like the wrapping around him, that's something that the face huggers did around the neck. And then they had the thing going down his esophagus as part of the face huggers, and this one has that too. It just feels like a different breed of face hugger to me.
I just think it's weird for you to say this when there's another thing in this movie that is far more like a face hugger.
It is, but it's like massive, and it's not so much a face hugger as a smotherer. But
that's kind of the point. Is it's just a really big face hugger. It does the exact same thing where it pulls it in and puts a thing into the mouth.
I mean, because of the consequences of it, I wholly agree. But
yes,
I
it
also
does the exact thing that a face hugger does. That's the other key part there.
But then the other guy, he gets, because this thing also has acid blood, it sprays into his spacesuit's face, and he goes face down into the black goop that's there.
Yes.
And it seemingly does something to him.
Yeah, the acid. I mean, there is a cool shot here, at least, of like all the plastic of the dome, the mask, melting into his face. I did think that looked kind of good. Like that was a cool shot. I'll give them
totally
that.
Agree.
Okay. But yeah, it's basically just like a snake thing that's got like a vagina head that kind of like goes up his arm and then into his mouth and kills him. Whereas for some reason the ginger guy who got his mask melted, he shows up as like a zombie later, but we'll talk about that later. We'll talk about that when we get to it.
Okay, sure.
Right. Because I also want to talk about here, this is like where they're trying to build character, I guess, where the captain, Idris Elba's character that is, and Vickers, Charlize Theron's character, like interact for like a second, and then he's like, hey, you want to get laid? And then she says no, and then he sort of cracks a joke and she's like, all right then, 10 minutes, my room, and that's it. Like, okay.
Literally his pickup line. She's like, hey, you want to get laid? She's like, no, not at all. Bye. And she starts to leave, and he's like, hey, wait a minute, Vickers, are you a robot? And she's like, all right, I'm in. Let's go.
I I hate to play devil's advocate here, but I think the idea is that she was protesting too much. Doth protest too much. I think it was like, no, she is actually tempted. She's just, like whatever. But anyway,
oh yeah, I get nothing. It. It's just it's a nothing scene.
It's a nothing scene because nothing goes anywhere with these two. Nothing, like later on, arguably there's a conflict between them. But this is the attempt to say that they have some kind of feeling for each other. Like both characters feel ultra thin as it is. This connection between them feels ultra thin. So they did not do enough. If you wanted to give me a thing where they actually had feelings for each other, I don't know, give me a few different scenes where they clearly like each other, and maybe so the idea that later on when one's giving the other one an order and they want to betray it or not do it, it causes some internal conflict. It's like, okay, this feels like a bigger deal because not only is he saying no to her, he's saying no to someone that he cares about, but there's not a hint that anyone cares about anyone here.
I'm also 100% down because apparently this was a thing that they wanted to do, that Ridley wanted to do in the original Alien movie, is that the idea that when you're out in space like this, it's just accepted that there's a culture of like casual sex, of just like, we all have needs, like just do what you want to do, so be it. It's not like frowned upon or anything like that. But again, because it's just the one time and because nobody ever mentions it again, it's a nothing scene. It doesn't result in anything. It's just there.
That idea is doesn't come across because it is just this one example. If he had been like with someone else earlier in the movie, and then he did this, and then like maybe it came up to the other person, and they just kind of shrugged it off, like, yeah, of course, that might have like told us the idea that this is normal, and they're all kind of okay with all just casual sex with each other.
But strangely enough, that would then make that the most established theme of the movie. So,
yeah. Oh god, it's like one of the few attempts to actually give either of these two a little bit of character. Because other than this, all Charlize Theron has is like, this is all a waste of time and money. I hate this, and I want to be in charge.
She's literally the personification of the song "Bitch" by Meredith Brooks. I'm a bitch. Like, that's, just imagine that every time she walks in the room.
Oh, yeah, I never mentioned early on, they established that her living quarters is actually effectively a lifeboat that's got its own system, its own life support, its own medical bay. Well, not even just medical bay. She has the fancy like automated medical bay that's better than the other one. It's like it can do surgeries, which is important, as we'll find out later.
Yep.
I will say that scene was a little bit like, okay, the fact that this place has its own life support and this surgery thing, it felt like it was setting up a lot of things for later. Like, and it was really noticeable, especially on this rewatch, where I'm like, okay, this just feels like a dump of like important things for later, as opposed to like, developing anything on its own or.
Well, it's especially because the entire like whole reason they were in Charlize Theron's room was for her to basically say like, I'm your boss, remember that, and then she just kicks him out. But like, that's preceded by 2.5 minutes of, wow, look at this thing, and oh, this thing can separate from the ship entirely, it's its own lifeboat, wow.
Yeah, there's that, but then the other problem on the other side of that is that this dynamic she sets up here, which is fine, it's not particularly exciting, but it's fine if they want to go down that path. I don't feel like it comes up that much where she's like giving them orders or clashing with them. It does like once or twice, but honestly, not in any ways that feel like a payoff to this.
Nah, the only way that it is once we get Charlie's final moment. That's the only way I could see it paying off.
Yeah, that's the thing. So the next day they wake up, they're like, hey, we can go back in, find those other two guys and do some more sciencey stuff. So they go back in.
Charlie's got the mother of all hangovers, apparently.
Charlie's got like a little like worm thing in his eye, which is his first indication that something's not right. And basically all that happens here is they go back into the dome, they find at least one of the dead bodies of the two guys, and then Charlie starts like collapsing and freaking out, and his skin's going all black and veiny, and his eyes
matching the
terrible.
way that the engineer died in the opening scene, pretty much.
So they race back to the ship, and Charlize Theron that comes down with like a flamethrower and says he's not getting on this ship. And Shaw's arguing, no, we can still save him. And even, to be fair, Idris Elba's even saying at this point, hey, no, we can isolate him from everyone else. We can try and do that. Notably at one point, well, this is later actually, but David says, hey, we can all take our helmets off. The air's breathable here. And Shaw's like, hey, we don't know what happened to Charlie wasn't in the air. Like that seems like a bad idea now. And he's like, no, that definitely wasn't from the air. And she's like, how do you know that? And he never answers it, but I'm just like, yeah, because he poisoned them. That's why.
He gives her such a look. He's just like, think about what I did to you already, and then extrapolate from there.
Oh, I'm so cheeky. So Charlie, though, is like got enough of his brain there at this point where he's like, you know what? No, this is actually for the best. And he walks towards Theron and says, do it. So we get a scene of Shaw screaming no as like Idris Elba pins her down and she's crying as Charlie burns alive.
Which, full credit, all of that was practical. Like, they added on like a couple of flames for just dramatic effect, but they gave Charlize Theron a flamethrower and aimed it at a stuntman. Like, top marks for that to go all the way. It
looked good. The problem is that I don't give a shit about any of these characters. So having a scene where one of them cries out and knows the other one's dying, and not even just dying, sacrificing himself because he knows he doesn't want to give this to her or anyone else. He wants this to be contained. He's doing kind of the smart thing. Like, this is what I was talking about earlier when I said some of this stuff feels really rushed. Like, him realizing that something might be wrong with them, and then it's like almost the next scene, he collapses and everyone else realizes there's something wrong with him, and then the very next scene is him sacrificing himself. Like, there's almost no time to be like, watch him be scared that other people will find out, or like contemplate what's happening to himself. There's not a lot of time for Shaw to really sort of dig in and try and like consider the ideas that she's going to have to try and save him, or potentially might happen. It just, we go boom, 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 and that's it. He's had his big sacrifice, and she's crying her eyes out and yelling and screaming. But I don't care about any of it because you've just rushed through it all.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking back to the original Alien movie of how long did the conversation between Ripley and like the other crew members take about getting John Hurt on board? And I have to imagine it must have at least been the length of like 2 of these scenes combined.
Possibly. I'd have to go back and check. But
yeah. It just felt like it gave it so much more like weight to it that they're like they have to argue and talk about this. Meanwhile, this doesn't have any arguments about it. Charlize Theron just says, "Don't open the door." Flamethrower. Okay, open the door. And that's it. That's all you get.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, for some reason, Idris Elba wasn't on the ship. Like, he went with the team this time for some reason. I don't know why. But if he was still on the ship, what if Charlize Theron was saying, no, don't open the door, and then he betrayed that order and opened the door because he wants to try and help? Yeah. And then that's when she grabs the flamethrower because the door's open and she has this standoff. But it did feel really weird for her to be like, don't open the door. Okay, now open it because I'm ready with my flamethrower. Like, that felt like a weird, like, this weird little beats that just, it's almost like they were trying to go out of their way to make things just, like, nothing feel like it's too much like they're doing just stuff from Alien. But they're all just weird little choices that make no sense, just for the sake of being different. They are purposely
putting themselves in situations that are similar to Alien. But whereas Alien just used common sense and how people would normally react, they're like, well, we can't do that. We have to do something different than Alien. So instead we do something that's different from common sense.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. That's a big problem with this. And this again, quickly escalates where Shaw wakes up on a med bay and David's there scanning her and whatnot. And this is where he finds out she's pregnant with some kind of irregular fetus, is how he puts it, I think. And she's like, this is impossible. This does not make sense. And he's like, oh, we're going to put you in cryo sleep. We're going to like just, that's all this is. And this kind of feels like this is them wanting the sample. They want to take her back to Earth so they can do something with the alien. This is sort of tying into the whole classic, the company wants the alien specimen to do stuff. She actually has to fight her way out of this, right? She has to make a run for it, and she actually makes her way to Charlize Theron's like med bay, like hers on a private part of the ship. And she goes in there and uses the fancy robot automated med bay to perform surgery and take the alien thing out. And it's a bit squid-like. Obviously, it ends up being more facehuggery once it actually evolves to full size. But it's got this, it's almost like 4 tails. It's got 4 tails. But
the official name for it is the trilobite.
Very good. But you get this whole sequence here where the machine's applying anesthesia and it's like cutting her out with a laser and it pulls the thing out with a hook. And I did appreciate that she has to sort of slide her face past it to get out of the pod. Like, just that was like mildly tense. And then she just locks it in there and it's like, okay, it's in there locked up now. And I think one of the biggest things that really pissed me off in this movie is that she doesn't bring this up to anyone. Right. She just goes on the next mission with them. Like, what?
This scene is also happening simultaneously with Ginger Goop guy being all evil, attacking the base. And it feels like so much is happening, and then there's no consequences from any of it. And we're just left with the next scene being like, okay, let's go back in, everybody.
Yeah, it's right around here. You're right. The Ginger guy is like a zombie. And I'm like, how, like, at least the other thing is just saying, okay, it's that similar type of organisms to Alien and the Xenomorph, so similar type things are happening. But this zombie thing is just like, why is he just attacking the ship and then they have to, like, flamethrower him?
Yeah. No, I that's the part I've been trying to figure out. I've been trying to figure out what in this is supposed to say this dude became a zombie, and I still have no idea. Because it isn't set up at all. Every other thing in the entire Alien franchise has always been about this sort of forced pregnancy idea. You have the chest bursters, you have this incubation period, it is a parasite. So to now have this thing be like mind control or some other like mental thing like that, I don't get it. I have no idea where it's coming from.
But even if you take it away from the themes, I just don't understand what the purpose of the scene is, other than just, oh, there's a couple of more red shirts we've not killed off. We have to get rid of them quickly.
Yeah, that's true. Honestly, I was surprised when he showed back up. They said that his body wasn't there, which is what made it like at least a little bit signaled, but with the plastic sticking to his face, he was dead.
Right? I just thought he was dead, yeah.
Yeah, like you could have just killed him there. It wouldn't have changed anything.
Yeah, and like I say, like the people he interacts with are mostly just red shirts, I think. Like maybe the Scottish woman is down there, maybe she dies here, I can't remember where she dies.
I'm not sure.
Oh no, she dies. No, she dies with Engineer. I remember her being in that scene.
So honestly, nobody of importance dies in this scene. Yeah,
this is literally red shirts who I could not even remember their faces are down here.
I do absolutely love though that they show how durable he is. They show how much he's able to keep on getting up and fighting, to the point where the thing that finally takes him down is not only have they shot him, not only have they used the flamethrowers on him, but they also run him over with a tank. And I think that's just moving into the realm of comedy of how much it takes to take this guy down. Yeah,
it's, well, when you say tank, it's like their RV truck thing that they use to move people around.
It's got the tank treads and it's big though, so it's pretty much a tank.
Yeah. Well, in the same way that rovers on Mars all have treads and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So also around here we get the reveal, right? Because it's like Shaw stumbles into the room after she's had this whole monster abortion that she's just had, and she just stumbles into a room, and would you look at that? Old man Wayland was in cryo sleep, and he came on the trip, and he's done this because he's hoping that the creator will also be able to fix him, i.e. stop him from dying, because he's a rich old man who doesn't want to give up his time. And there's a whole scene with Charlize Theron around this part where she's like, kings die, and that they have their reign and then they die. The implication being it's her time now. She's the daughter. She's meant to be taking the empire, and he's like, no, I'm going to try and live forever. I'm going to try and outlast everyone and have my money do all this. He spent trillions of dollars with a space mission to get out here and do this. Honestly, the second I saw Guy Pearce in old age makeup be on the ship, this is where this is just complete. It wasn't good up until this point. Obviously, we've had tons of complaints, but for me, this is where I'm like, okay, I hate this now. I felt even stronger every viewing I've had of this, where I get to this part and I'm like, I hate that he's here. I understand that it's realistic that some rich old asshole would want to try and live forever, and that's what he's hoping to find here. I get that part, but just because something is understandable in a real world sense doesn't mean it's right for the movie and where it's going.
No, yeah. I think that this is the worst place scene in the movie. It might work better somewhere else, but where it is here is the worst, because we have Shaw stumbling around, just having surgery on herself. There is a monster alien in the chamber where the med pod was, and she just stumbles into this room and she's bleeding everywhere. And there's this old guy getting his feet washed by David. And then it's like, nobody mentions it. Nobody mentions that Shaw has stapled her stomach shut. They're just like, oh, hey, Shaw, Wayland's alive. Not only that, we're going to go do this.
Not only that, Shaw doesn't mention what she's just been through, and especially to David, who put her in that situation in the first place. She never goes, oh, I shouldn't trust you, David, because you were going to just put me in cryo sleep with this alien in my stomach. No. Yeah. She just kind of suits up and says, yeah, I'm going to come with you guys as you go in and talk to the engineer. Because by this point in the movie, David's went in on his own, and he's turned on the holograms. He's seen where they were going. He now understands he has to play the little flute. Don't worry, there's more flute action in the second movie, an Alien Covenant.
Oh, good. That's the part I was hoping for.
I want to quote the dumb line, but I'll save it because you've not seen the movie, so I'm going to save it, and I'll make fun of it next time.
Okay.
But yeah, I think this is part of the problem with the momentum of the movie, is that it feels like this is just the movie starting again. All this stuff just happened, but it's like, no. Now we're going in with the old man to go and encounter the engineer. We're going to wake up the engineer because David's found a cryopod, effectively, in the alien part of the ship, inside the dome, right? Because that semicircle ship from Aliens in there, right? Which makes sense. We all expected that to be there. And it feels like, we're suiting up, we're going out on this mission. It feels like we're starting a new plot.
Yeah. It feels like this is supposed to be the parallel to the point where Ripley finds out from Mother, what the actual orders are. And that we are discovering this has changed everything. This is setting up a new thing. But at no point did that interrupt Ripley's thought process. At no point did that stop what she was doing. Her whole thing throughout the movie was, I need to survive this with as many of my coworkers as possible. But in this movie, like you said, it just fully stops Shaw's plot to the point where she's like, yeah, I just had surgery, but I'll join you guys back out in the dangerous alien ship. Sure, why not? I want to talk to God.
So they go out, they wake up the engineer. There's a couple of red shirts with them. Whatever red shirts are left, they're there too. And the engineer wakes up. He stands up. He looks around a little bit. David speaks in whatever language that the engineer will understand, and then the engineer just rips off David's head and just slaps the old man. Throws the red shirts away. Snaps the neck of the Scottish lady. Luckily, Shaw was the last for him to go after, so she's already started bolting it out the exit. She's just running away at this point. But yeah, and he just goes over to his console. He sits down. We
get the full space jockey.
It rises up.
Seat.
Yeah. And then the armor comes on around him, so we see all the thing. I'm like, okay. And it's clear that he's going to take off, right? And I think David either overcomes or whatever, because obviously he's an android, so his head's still alive. He starts talking to Shaw, and he says, hey, they're going to Earth. Their plan was to destroy Earth, right, and kill everyone on Earth. And so when I first saw the movie at this point, I thought, okay, well, obviously we've not seen the eggs or the xenomorph on the ship itself. However, my assumption was, given what they're about to set up here, right, where Shaw is telling Idris Elba, we can't just run away because this thing's going to Earth. Their mission is to go to Earth and wipe out all life. We have to take them down. And Idris Elba's like, this is not a military ship. And she's like, I know, meaning the only way we can do that is to crash into it and basically doom ourselves, right? And Charlize Theron doesn't want that, and that's the whole thing here. And it'd have been nice to care about Idris Elba as a character as he makes this big decision, but not only have they not developed him enough to be excited about him making this big decision to make it a big dramatic moment, they've also not really made it believable that he's heard enough to believe it himself. He just takes her word for it that that's what they're going to do. He's seen nothing to imply that this is all happening.
I wonder if he knew Wayland was on the ship. Everything points to no. Everything points to he had no idea.
Sounds like no, yeah.
Which then leads me to believe that, especially from the little I know about his character, there'd be no way that he trusts anything that David says from this point on.
Yeah.
He'd be like, no, you've been lying this whole time. Why would I trust that he's saying the stuff about Earth is true?
Does Idris Elba's character ever even talk to David in this movie?
If so, it's not a lot.
I don't remember any scenes of him talking to David. That feels like a bit of a... if his defining character moment is that he is going to make the choice to sacrifice himself and his ship and his two pilots, right, who say, no, we're going to stick with you, Captain. We don't have to escape. We're going to help you, right? It's meant to be this moment of camaraderie, and I'm like, if I cared about any of you three characters, this might mean something, but I don't. And I have a hard time believing that Idris Elba's character even is committed to this because he's not been given enough or seen enough to prove that. But anyway, but what I was getting at is that when I first saw this, when this was all starting off and the opening, the ground was all opening up to let the ship out, and it's like, okay, we're going to try and take it down. What I thought was going to happen to sort of tease, this is how it kind of links up with Alien, is that they would crash into it after they've been in space for a little bit, and it would land on a different moon. And the idea being is that the ship in Alien is this ship from this planet, but they have crashed it, in pursuit after it's left LV-223 or 233 or whatever this number is. And it crash lands on 246 or 426. And, okay, there you go. The eggs are on there somewhere. We just never saw them. And that's how you link it up. Instead, they crash it in the sky on this moon. So it just crashes here on this planet, meaning that it has nothing to do with Alien.
Can I hurt you a little? Can I make this worse?
I'm unsure how you're going to achieve that, but go on.
Back matter time again. Extra.
So it's non-canon, but fine.
I mean, it's on the Blu-ray, so take that as you will.
The extra features don't count, but go on.
Okay, fair enough. Apparently, there is a little text thing that's prescribed by Wayland telling David, hey, we're going to 223 because that's where it seems super obvious that all this stuff is going to be there. It's the most Earth-like planet, so we're thinking that's the most likely option. But just so you're aware, on the other side of this planet, there's another moon, 426. Don't tell anybody about that because it also has special interest for us.
Oh, that's it. Okay, I thought it was good. That doesn't make me that mad. Well,
Okay.
Well, because it makes sense that other moon's nearby because it's in the same naming
it's another
system.
military like installation. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I just like so this was all baffling, and then it has that stupid thing where the separate pod, which is Charlize Theron's place, detaches. She's running for the escape hatch because she doesn't want to die.
Why didn't she go into her pod?
I guess it was too far away, maybe? I don't know.
All right, fair enough. I just, all of a sudden they detached that, and I'm like, no one's even in there. Why are you bothering?
Yeah, also, they did this thing where, again, like, I feel like you've not established these characters enough for me to understand this, but Idris Elba, just before they ram into it, goes, hands up, and all three of them put their hands up like this, as if they're on a roller coaster, and I'm like, oh.
I took that as a, like, okay, everybody, like, hands off the controls, no swerving at the last second here. Like, we're gonna commit to this. That's how I took that. I
took it more as I don't know, like it's a thing they do.
Like, all right, the camera's gonna flash as soon as we hit the peak here. Everyone look like you're having fun.
And then they do this thing where when the alien ship comes down and it sort of like is rolling on its side, right?
Yeah.
And it's chasing Charlize Theron and Shaw and Noomi Rapace, right? This is the most classic thing in a movie, maybe the best example I've ever seen, where all I can say is, why not run diagonally? Why not try to go to the side, and therefore you're at less risk of it rolling on top of you?
So here's the thing. Obviously, when this came out, that was like a meme for a while of people making fun of the fact of like, why didn't you just move?
Yeah, because relatively speaking, it's not that. I mean, obviously, it's maybe like, I don't know, like a bus wide, or maybe even 2 buses wide. But relative to its entire shape, it's not that wide. So it's rolling. It's rolling like a wheel, right? It's like a wheel coming after someone. So all you're thinking is, if you just pivot and go at an angle, so that you're also running horizontally in reference to that, eventually you'll be out of its path.
So what I was getting at was, that was a meme. Having never seen this movie, I assumed that there was something in the movie that was like keeping them from doing that. Like there was something like that people were just overlooking or something like that. But then there's the point,
David, you ignorant slut.
Then there's the point where Shaw trips and she falls onto the ground. She looks up at this giant wheel about to crush her, and she like rolls one time over, like onto her stomach, onto her back, and she's out of the way. I'm like, oh, okay, then that's completely inexcusable. If you could just roll one time and you're completely clear of it.
Oh, jeez.
And then obviously Charlize Theron is even stupider because she gets totally crushed by it. So
yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Also, I just want to go back here for a second and point out how little of like a big deal it felt like Wayland got killed by the engineer. Like it felt like that should have been a big deal, like a prominent character got killed. But because he feels like tacked on to the movie, because he's like in hiding the whole time, it just felt like such a nut. It's like, oh, he's already gone. Like we had this big reveal of this character's really here, and he's gone within a couple of scenes in like a nothing moment.
I'm more okay with that, only because it seems to further this idea of like nobody escapes death. Like no matter how important you are, you're still going to just end up dead. I like the idea that it's not given that much weight because all of us are equal in death like that. Like it's not something where he gets special treatment in any regard.
True, but like I don't care about any of the deaths in this movie. Which I guess
so they're all equal. There you go.
Yeah, but not a good equal.
No.
Like, if anything, I should feel like, oh, he deserved it. You know, like he's the Paul Reiser. You're happy a little bit that he died, but I didn't even care that. Yeah, I didn't care that either. So Noomi Rapace, or Shaw, I should say, goes to the pod, right? The lifeboat with where Charlize Theron's place is, which by the way, it looks pretty wrecked after the way it landed. I'm like, how good is this as a lifeboat when it's destroyed already?
I mean, I think it hit it like a mountain or a rock or something like that, so clearly it didn't have a happy landing, but yeah. So
she goes up to the med bay with an axe, been like, oh shit, that thing's in there, and she's looking around, and it turns out it's like grown very, very big, like it's huge. And as she's looking in the little window, David starts talking to her over the comms because his head's like still sitting there in the alien place. Yeah. And he's like, hey, Shaw, if you can hear me, you better move. He's coming for you. And then you see like the engineer who's like half burned because he's had this crash landing. he's like storming in because he's pissed, and he goes to grab her. So she does the big balls move of opening the door to the med bay, and these tentacles like grab him, and it is just like this giant face hugger, because it's like, and it's just instead of wrapping around his face, it's like one tentacle's getting his arm, another tentacle's getting that arm, but it's all pulling itself forward towards him to put its main little thing into his mouth. And I loved it when it succeeds after she's ran away. By this point, it just kind of slumps on top of him, because obviously he falls over, and it just kind of like dies on top of him. I thought that was quite funny.
I think that I had, because of the way we saw like it looked squid-like before when it came out of Shaw, I had a different mental image of it on what it looks like on the back end, like what's hidden in the room. So it's only once it slumps on top of him, like, oh, that's a face hugger. Okay, I get it. I see what you're doing here.
And then Shaw goes and gets David's head, and he's like, hey, Shaw, I can fly their ships. There's more of them. Like, there's tons of them. And I thought, okay, maybe the ship they take is going to crash on another moon. Maybe that'll happen.
Shaw becomes the space jockey. Just really big.
Well, it would... Technically, it could be her in the space jockey in the original Alien, because the armor wouldn't be designed for her. She would just she'd just be inside the big armor that it puts around her. Obviously, that's not the case, though.
Not at all.
So he's basically like, I can fly us home, and she's like, I don't want to go home. I want to go and find them. And all I could think was, do you think there's a food supply on these ships for you, Shaw? How are you going to stay alive on this alien ship exactly? And the fact that the movie ends, barring the little tag, obviously, where it does the alien thing, I was like, this movie ends with her flying off into space in the alien ship with David's head. And although they took his body, you see her lowering his body, so they've got his body, so she reattaches his head, presumably after. No, I've seen the next one. She definitely reattached his head.
Oh, so David comes back. Cool.
Oh, David's in the next one, yeah. Cool. Not a lot of Noomi Rapace in the next one, though.
Well, clearly there's no food. She's dead.
But she's like, no, I want to go find them. I have to know like why they changed their minds. And I'm like, how do you know they changed their minds? This could have always been the plan, is to let you go for a couple of thousand years and then reset, because that's how experiments work. You don't know they changed their mind. This could have always been the plan.
Maybe the reason that they kept coming back and showing the stars is like there was a countdown thing going on. There was like, you got 10,000 years to get to this planet, or else we're going to kill you. And we lost it by 2,000 years. But
I cannot emphasize enough, and I said this earlier, but how little it made me care about the fact that she wants answers, especially when these answers come from like almost certain suicide of like traveling further into space away from civilization. Like, it just, everything about it just feels weird to me as a choice.
Here's the thing that gets me feeling even weirder, is that she is supposed to be a character of faith. You know, like, yes, she's a scientist and she wants to get answers for certain things, but ostensibly her binding thing as a person is her faith that she has in some form of religion. Obviously, it's Christianity here, but we'll just say religion as a whole.
Actually, just to interject here, isn't a big part of faith and religion, though, not looking for the answers?
That's exactly what I was getting to, is that it feels like they wanted to give this scientist faith, and they didn't fully comprehend the sort of things they'd have to give up for that. Like, you're allowed to have a scientist who believes in a higher power. That's entirely a thing that can happen. But you can't have them simultaneously believe that, like, there is a higher power and I can get all of the answers. Unless they believe that they are going to physically meet up with God in some sort of normal form.
Yeah, I think I want to emphasize here, I was, ranting earlier about how I don't give a shit about who made us, and that's kind of a personal thing. And I was sort of playing it up for that reason. But I think the core problem here is this decision at the end, is that this movie has not done a good enough job to make me understand her enough to why she's making this choice. Like, it's not done enough to make me understand why she's went from not wanting the answers like Charlie did to now wanting them. I just don't get it. I don't think the movie tells me that story of like why she now is like so obsessed with this that she's going to go just like needlessly going through space. And I'm sure, there's probably a homing thing on the ship. It's probably not impossible to find a home world. But what happens once you get there? They're just going to kill you. Like, you've seen what they're like. Why? They're not going to kill you. They're going to squish you like a bug. This is stupid.
My only thing for the character that I think even kind of explains it is that up until the point where she realizes that each of the urns is essentially a nuclear bomb, she believes in a caring God. She believes in a God who made humans out of love rather than a smiteful, wrathful God who's going to come in and wipe them all out, That's the only thing I could think is changing her opinion, where she's just like, well, no, what did we do wrong? I want the answer specifically to that. Maybe not where we came from, but specifically, what did we do wrong here? How can we fix ourselves? How can we better ourselves? And I can see that, but like, it's so slight that the movie barely explores that aspect.
Yeah, you've added a lot to that.
Yeah.
to get to that. I feel like if you give me like this is such an extreme decision she makes at the end that just doesn't feel like it makes sense in any logical
setting up
way.
A trilogy.
Yeah, but I'm like, so what? The next movie, in theory, right? It doesn't, but the next movie, in theory, would just start with like her on this ship alone with David, and they're exploring together. I'm like, we need characters to kill off if we're doing an alien movie, if that's what we're going to still be pretending we're doing.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like such a weird decision that I just don't think feels like a fitting conclusion to anything they've actually built up in the movie. It ends with a line where she said, she's doing like the audio log thing. They're basically copying the Ripley speech from the end of the first movie, where this is the final message of the Prometheus. Blah 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 blah. I'm still out here. I'm still searching, and like it made me think of Optimus Prime at the end of Transformers, where he sends a message out to the Autobots.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like the same sort of cadence. It was weird.
I'm sure there's a cut somewhere online where Prometheus ends with "What I've Done" by Linkin Park.
It would fit if it cut to the credits and "What I've Done" started playing. It would actually fit. It's so weird. Obviously, though, after your sort of hopeful exploration ending, which does not land for me at all, so I did not feel satisfied by that. It cuts to your little tease to try and connect it slightly more to Alien, which is that the engineer who is face hugged starts to like move and twitch, and something bursts out of his stomach. Not quite his chest, but his stomach. And we get a kind of xenomorph. It's not quite. It's like, it's got a pointy head. It does kind of have an inner mouth, but it's not like the thin inner mouth that's like a cock. It's more like just an extra layer of teeth that comes out from behind the other teeth.
Yeah. So I apparently its common name in the alien community is called Deacon, which is, I guess, because its head shape is something like a deacon in Christianity or something.
Okay.
But it is essentially, it says it's a stage in the life cycle of the proto-xenomorph species. So again, if this is a connection to Alien as a franchise as a whole, and they're saying like, yep, nope, this is how it all began. Great, cool, awesome. I love that idea. Except for the fact of it's 30 years, man. You don't have 300 years for this species to evolve and change into like the xenomorph we know. I'm like, this thing needs to give birth to exactly what we expect to see.
David, all I'll say is that to that specific query, there's an answer next time.
Here's the thing. The fact that you're saying that in a dismissive tone means I'm not going to be happy.
I'm not happy at it. Like, if you're saying there's slightly different breeds of alien, right, and the one we're seeing in this movie is not quite the one from the classic movies, but it's showing that they've done different experiments. That the engineers have, concocted various, different strains, if you will, of xenomorph, and this is one of them. That's not terrible as an idea, but when you start talking about how, this is like part of the the proto alien and like how it's going to change over time until like, I don't want to have it explained to me how the xenomorph becomes the xenomorph. I don't care about that.
Right.
It's more the larger topics that are interesting, which is, it's a weapon of mass destruction that another alien race was using. I remember reading on the internet a long time ago, there was this crazy theory about how the xenomorph was built to take out the creature from the Thing, because the Thing couldn't duplicate it because of its life cycle or something like that. It was just fan fiction, but it was like this idea that it was built to take out like a dangerous threat somewhere else is really interesting.
I love that idea, actually.
Or maybe it was the other way around. The Thing was designed because the alien, because it copies the alien couldn't infect it with a face hugger, so it was like
right,
immune
so
to
it could change. Yeah.
It was one. I can't remember which way around it was, but either way, it was interesting. It was like,
yeah. Regardless, I love that. That's fantastic.
Like that sort of thing is interesting, and I think if they just sort of like teased that in like a different movie, if there was just these teases of like, hey, that ship that was found once upon a time was some kind of, like carrier for a weapon of mass destruction, but obviously something went wrong, an alien actually came to life and killed the space jockey, it crashed on the moon. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than that, right? It can be just like a character theorizing maybe, or something. It's a sort of little bit that I like to be teased without actually explaining it all. And you started this review by comparing something to Star Wars. I'm going to do it here again.
Mm-hmm.
When you watch the original Star Wars movies and they talk about a time when the Jedi were this active like force, like there was almost like a military style thing where there was tons of Jedi and the galaxy was a better place. Teasing that by saying that, right, and just wondering how it could have been given how different things are now is a lot more interesting than actually seeing a Jedi council sit and like debate things like they're a politician like gathering. Like you're taking all the mystique out by actually showing it, and I think showing me the engineers and and especially tying it to Earth, where the engineers actually care about Earth, it makes the world feel small. In the same way that in Star Wars, having everything connect to the Skywalkers in some way, having the engineers specifically care about Earth means that it's making this connection that we didn't need before. The finding of the alien in the original Alien feels very like happenstance almost. It's like, oh, we stumbled into it, and now, this is like the first breadcrumb that Wayland Yutani get, and it's why the care of, the Ian Holmes character has to try and like preserve it in some way, right? If they get a hint that there's something alien, they want it, and this is the first breadcrumb, it makes it feel important in that movie. It feels special that this is the first encounter with an alien life form that the human race in this universe has ever had. But now, if you accept Prometheus as canon, and I don't, but I'm watching Alien 1, I'm not sitting thinking, oh, the engineers did this, and like there's an engineer sitting in that space jockey. It's not even in my head. I'm not thinking about it, because it ruins everything. It takes the mystique out of all of it.
Yeah, nah. I mean, I thought you were going to go a different way with Star Wars, though. I agree with you in terms of tying it back to the Skywalker family makes it feel so small and all that. But
yeah.
I would also go out of the way to say, like, you watch the original trilogy and you got the Force, and the Force is just this thing that all the kids in the schoolyard can pretend to have, and it's just so cool, and it can do all these cool things. And then you get midichlorians. And then you get the explanation that the Force only works if you got these special little particles in you, and if you get a high count of them, you're stronger, and all of a sudden the mystique of it just goes away.
Honestly, trying to tie... I mean, the big mistake of this movie's entire broad concept is I don't like that they tried to make the creators of the alien, the xenomorph, right? Also the creators of life on Earth. I think that is the big thing that I think was the bad idea. And then so much of the movie tries to revolve around that, and they don't do enough with it to actually make it feel like it's important on its own.
Yeah. Honestly, I think I would have been a little more okay with it if they had explicitly told us that there is life on other planets. If the engineers made Earth with life, but then there was also some other planet that has life, and some other planet. If we were just one of many, and the aliens were just essentially the antivirus that they'd come up with of any time things get too out of control, I'd be more okay with that. But this movie implies that there's Earth and there's them. And like, there's not a lot else that is being explored there.
I mean, maybe the engineers have got other planets that they've started life on. I mean, we don't know if they don't. It's adding this whole extra thing into this universe that just feels so, I intend this pun. It feels alien to this entire concept. Like when I'm watching Alien and Aliens, I'm not questioning why humans exist in them. That's not the point. Like humans just exist, and then all these other things we're doing are there. This is the new thing this movie adds, is that, oh no, the creators of the xenomorph also created human beings, and that just opens this huge can of worms that does not in any way really link up with what Alien or Alien's strengths were or what they were about. Yes, they talked about this life cycle, and they talked about, but it wasn't like, it was cool to think about where the aliens came from, and like, because obviously this spaceship they're on wasn't theirs. There's clearly some other alien life out there that they presumably have wiped out, or at least wiped out whoever was flying this ship. but you're not thinking about it on like a biology level, like how were they created? You know, you're not thinking about that side of it. You're thinking about where did they come from.
Like, this is going to sound like a weird little analogy, but whenever I go on vacation, or used to go on vacation with my families, they enjoy doing like escape rooms and stuff like that.
Sure.
And I'll always remember there was this one escape room where there was like a lockbox that had these combinations on it, you know? And obviously we're sitting there just like puzzling over the combinations. We're like, oh, maybe this will be a hint. Maybe this will be a hint. And in the end, we couldn't figure out what we were supposed to do with it. So they give us a little walkie-talkie to ask for a clue if we needed one. And we were like, okay, we'll take a clue. And the clue they gave us was, what color is the lockbox? And like, we're supposed to use the color of the lockbox to tie it into something else and some other like chain of events there. But like, it was one of those things that we weren't even thinking about that. We weren't even considering this idea of what color the lockbox was in like some mystery sense. And I feel like that's the same sort of thing we got here, where we are curious about the ideas of the xenomorphs, where they came from, what their purposes are, and that's all fine. But then this movie comes in and says, but where did humans come from? And it's like, I wasn't even thinking about that movie, and I don't care, really. I would rather the answers I was thinking about, even if you don't want to go all the way in depth with the details, just, you know, a few new things you can throw in there. I'd be more than happy with.
Yeah, it's not what anyone wanted from it. And don't get me wrong, there's a danger of just pandering to what fans of something want. And we've talked about that in many movies,
Yes.
Especially over in Collector's Cut. But it just feels like this wants to be a different movie that is only funded because it's been sold as a tie-in to Alien. And it's deserving both the movie they seem to want to do and also the movie that you want as being connected to an Alien movie. And also this further adds to the list of prequels suck. There's very few good prequels. If you're not Better Call Saul, you probably suck if you're a prequel, because prequels are not good ideas, okay? They're not.
That's fair.
And this one doesn't do as much of the teasing and like wink wink. It kind of does its own little breed of it, where it's like, hey, we're doing something that looks vaguely recognizable, but it's not quite it, so it's unsatisfying to everyone. It's unsatisfying to people who want a good story, but it's also unsatisfying to people who just want a tease of a xenomorph, because it's not actually a xenomorph. So yeah, it's pleasing no one.
I think the only time that it like may have gotten into the realm of pleasing someone is the moment where the space jockey costume comes on and he like gets into the seat. But by then, that's like an hour 30 into the movie. Like, it's too late. You've done too much.
It might even be like an hour 45. It's really near the end. Like, this movie has very little to offer. It fails on so many levels. It does at least look pretty, and it's not like, honestly, you'll be begging for it when you watch Covenant. Great. I think.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Maybe I'm overselling that a bit too much, but I don't connect with the characters. They don't do a good job of making them interesting or relatable or likable on their own terms. They don't have any payoff, so you don't really care when they're making big decisions. Like when one's sacrificing himself to save his wife, I didn't care. When the captain's making this choice to sacrifice himself and the others to stop this alien ship from getting back to annihilate Earth, I didn't care. So it failed on a character level. It fails as a tie-in to Alien because it just murkies everything up for the sake of drawing out more of a story that doesn't need to exist, because prequels are a bad idea anyway. So it doesn't need an explanation, but now we're over-explaining it, kind of thing. You've got that problem. And then as a movie about the new things it introduces, which is this idea of like who created humans and meeting your maker, it feels undercooked as well because it's spending so much time doing the other stuff. And I think for that stuff to work, you'd also have to have the character stuff work, because I'd have to really believe why our main characters really care about this. But there's never really a solid reason for why it's so important to Charlie, why he does this. And even Shaw, we kind of get like, oh, you know, she lost her parents. And I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't necessarily like give me an explanation for this particular thing she cares about. It just kind of broadly gives her trauma, right? I understand.
Yeah, there's a difference between backstory and motivation.
Yes, absolutely. I understand why the murder of the Waynes is motivation for Batman to want to take out criminals. He wants to make it safer so that it can't happen to anyone else. But she should be like a doctor trying to find cures for Ebola, if that's what we're going with here, because that's what killed her dad.
Yeah. But that wouldn't put her in space. There's no space Ebola.
So, yeah, it's a bad movie. I think it fails on every level it's seeking to satisfy. I don't think it works. Even as a cheap nostalgia like thing like Ghostbusters Afterlife, it fails at that as well because it's too busy trying to be slightly off the things that you recognize as well. So
yeah, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you just said. Although I would say that it does split it more evenly in my mind between wanting to be its own thing and wanting to be an Alien like prequel. I feel like it's almost 50-50 in there, especially once you hit more of the back half where we start getting all of the imagery and the face hugger comes back.
It shifts more, as it goes on. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And then David as a character, I think, is the biggest whiff because I think he's supposed to be the interesting one because he's the one who drives a lot of the things that happen. He's a character who potentially represents a lot because he's a creation who's starting to like rebel against his creators. Like, did he infect Charlie because that was part of what he's supposed to do for his boss? Doesn't feel like it. It feels like he just did that because he wanted to.
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, if you look at it, how was that supposed to save the boss at that point?
I don't think it does. It doesn't do anything.
It just feels more like a curiosity sort of thing of like, oh, now I will be the creator of something new.
Which ties into like maybe why the engineers just created life because they wanted to see what would happen. They wanted to observe potentially.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, yeah. And honestly, like it just gets more hokey the more you see of them. And if we ever actually did see their homeworld and saw like a crowd of these engineers, it would just feel like such a weird that just feels like a weird science like a a fantastical science fiction thing. It doesn't feel like an alien universe. It feels like we're in Star Wars or something.
I would feel like there would eventually be a character like Thanos who would step up and say like, we must send the aliens out to do this thing to save the universe. You would expect,
a CG character like Thanos. So I hope they never do that. I hope we never see any scenes on the engineer homeworld. I hope that never happens.
See, now I can't tell if you're seeding something that actually happens in Covenant or not.
I'm not going to tell you because part of the fun is you get to experience whatever that movie is.
All right.
So, all right. I want to say Covenant also actually is even worse when it comes to like, we're just not going to wear like spacesuits. We're just going to go out and breathe.
Yeah.
I feel like it's even worse than Covenant somehow. But again, I only saw it the once. I saw it when it came out. I've not seen it since. So that'll be a complete, I remember the flute. I remember.
The fact that this flute is coming back so much really makes me think of like David's just going to be doing like a Pied Piper thing down the halls. He's just do. Don't give me that. Don't give me that look. Don't tell me I'm right. I want to be wrong.
Not exactly, no. But there is a line of dialogue that will live with you forever based on the flute.
Okay. I can't wait.
All right. David, what are you rating Prometheus?
4. No more explanation needed.
I was thinking 4 as well. Yeah. I think when it came out, I probably gave it like a 7 because I really wanted to like it. And it's like, it's not that good, but like I want to like it. It looks good at least. And then next time I saw it, I'm like, nah, it's more like a 6 or a 5.5. I think I'm at a 4. I actually think this has steadily gotten worse every single time I've seen it. And it's only more disappointing every time I see it.
It's probably because I don't have as much of an attachment to like the franchise that I'm able to just jump right in on this and be like, no, it's not good.
I think as well, you have to realize this came out in 2012 before the nostalgia era of all these things. I think Star Wars The Force Awakens was the start of the real nostalgia, like, 6-year period or whatever it was of that. Jurassic World, Ghostbusters Afterlife, Halloween 2018, Terminator Dark Fate. There's just tons of them. And I felt like, I was still hopeful for these things, where if you just told me that they'll never make an Alien movie again, I'd be like, I'm fine with that. Like, that's okay. Like, obviously, I hope the one that's coming out is good. It would be nice to get a good one, but I would rather not have 10 more bad ones and just never have another one,
See, here's what's going to happen. This one's going to be good, and that's going to allow them to make 10 more bad ones because they're like, look, we can get it right every 7 movies.
Yeah. So don't worry, though. We'll be doing Covenant before Alien Romulus comes out in August.
Yes.
We do have it scheduled. I won't look and check where it is, but it's coming somewhere between now and then. So, Yes, before David talks about his homework, I will just say that you can support us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. It helps us out a bunch if you do. It helps keep the lights on. Obviously, sharing the podcast around does that as well. But some of the bonus things you can get over there, me and David do 2 monthly shows on Patreon. One is called the Criterion Cut, where we review movies from the Criterion Collection. So some of the best stuff ever made. And we have extra reels at the $5 tier and up, where we review some of the worst movies ever made. Hopefully so bad they're good. But that's not always the case.
Nope.
We'll have to do some Alien knockoffs on there, actually, at some point for the fun of it.
Well, we got to save those for future Alien days.
True, oh yeah, we'll do Creature, and we'll do Alien 2 on Alien Day maybe one day.
There you go. I'm assuming that's a completely separate franchise that's cashing in, yeah?
Yeah, there's no Alien 1. Like, it's called Alien 2 to try and cash in on Alien existing.
Oh, did it come out before Aliens?
Actually, I don't know if it came out before Aliens, but it did. But it was. There was no Alien 1 for itself. It was like no. We're going to try and trick people into thinking
it's the Troll 2 of the Alien franchise. Got it.
Yeah, the Bruno Mattei's Terminator 2 of the Alien franchise.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Only good things have been discussed here today.
So, with all that said, though, there's obviously bonuses for Streams After Midnight, the horror movie podcast that I do with Tim. And me and David also have Collector's Cut, where we do franchises and we do seasons of movies. We did like 70s disaster movies throughout January and February. We did
Ghostbusters as we spoke.
Yeah. So, go check out all that other stuff. But to wrap up the show, as we do here, David goes back and watches a sci-fi movie that we did on the show before his time. So, David, what was the movie for this week?
Well, Pete, I decided I wanted to stay in universe, even if it is expanded universe. But I have to get a little bit of prologue before I dive into that.
Okay. I'll be honest, as I was watching this, I thought, you know what? He does technically have 2 EVP movies that he could do with these two.
Yep.
So I've got a funny feeling that you're about to tell me that you watched Alien versus Predator.
You're wrong.
No?
Because I don't know what a predator is. So I watched Predator.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay, I get it. So you have to set up Predator for yourself first. Okay.
Yep. I figured that would have been the best viewing process there.
Well, that means you watched a good movie, though.
I did. It was good. It made my opinion on the Prometheus sour that much more.
Oh, yeah. Had you seen Predator before?
I had not, actually.
Oh, wow. Nope. Okay.
Yep. I mean, I was aware of the Predator's, gist. I knew the basics of how he worked. But no, I had never actually seen a Predator movie before.
Did you listen to the episode where we talked about it?
Unfortunately, no. Didn't have time to do that this time.
Well, in that case, I won't hold back then. I was going to just hold something back because I don't need to say it if he's already listened to the episode. But the great thing about Predator is that it's effectively a slasher movie where instead of a group of dumb teenagers, it presents you with a team of the ultimate badasses, like the muscular, most masculine men of the 1980s. It shows you how good they are. That whole opening bit where they go to the camp, it's to show how efficient, how good they are at what they do. But then the Predator still kills them off one by one. That's the beauty of that movie. It's so good.
Yeah. No, and I was processing that as it went through. I was definitely like, okay, I'm seeing that you are setting up that these guys are the best of the best, but then the Predator is just that much better, and they just immediately start losing.
This is a callback to a season we did on Collector's Cut, but this team is what the Expendables are supposed to be.
Yes, absolutely. To the point where they even say that line. It's like, we're assets, expendable assets. I'm like, hey, you know what you're going to be doing in 40 years. But yeah, no, it's a solid movie. I definitely did really enjoy it. I was a little bit worried with the special effects when we cut to the Predator vision, because it's obviously very it's heat vision, obviously, but it's the style that they're showing it in is very pixelated and very outdated. So I was a little bit worried that it was all going to be that much outdated, but honestly,
the rest of it's good. Yeah.
The rest of it is pretty solid, holds up pretty well there.
Stan Winston designed the Predator. He also did the Terminator stuff. And Aliens, funnily enough. Obviously, he didn't design Alien, but he did the Queen. He did a lot of that stuff in the second one.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I can't say there was anything in there I disliked really. I think the only thing that kind of it might have been when I was watching, because I was watching it really late at night, but there was a period where he finally figures out how to fight the Predator, what to do about that. And I feel like the speed of the movie, the pace of the movie there kind of like rapidly fluctuated between moving super quick and then also going really slow based off of what the rest of it was. But it all built up through a very solid third act fight that I did enjoy the whole way through. So I can't say I really fault it for anything that it was doing there.
Okay. Plus you finally got to hear, "Get to the chopper!"
I did. I kept on waiting for it because, like, every once in a while, I mean, the entire point of the third act is they're trying to work their way back to this helicopter that's miles away. But I kept on expecting every single time that they were talking about it to be like, "Oh, here it is." But no, it's actually the very last time that it's ever brought up is the time where he finally says it. It's solid movie throughout. I don't think I have like as much of a connection, but I would still give this one, I'd still give it a solid 9. Like I can definitely see why it holds up, but that only makes me a little bit more upset the fact that looking at the Predator franchise as a whole, how like none of them seem like they were well received up until we get Prey.
I mean, I really like 2, but it's not like a great movie. But I do love 2. But now 1's really well directed. John McTiernan, who directed it, who went on to do Die Hard, like that was his next movie. It's so like there's so many cheap movies where people think, we'll just shoot in the forest or the jungle because it's cheap to do that, and they're all trash. Like it takes skill to make it compelling in that location, and it does. Like you never question it. And good ensemble cast. Got a young Shane Black in there making pussy jokes.
Yeah, that. I'm not that upset he was the first one dead. I'm going to be honest with you there. But no, another thing that I really liked though was without actually confirming anything, it does a really good job of allowing the audience to figure out what the Predator's rules are.
Sure,
like they never ever have a character come out and say like, "Oh, he can only do this, but only for these reasons." It's like, no, you just pick it up visually. Yeah,
it's all visual. It's very good. The idea that he's hunting game and he's picked these guys because they are the best prey on Earth, like they're the biggest challenge. The idea that I mean, spoilers here just in case you haven't seen Predator, guys. The idea that he won't go after someone who's unarmed, especially a woman. Like he sees that as unsporting, I guess. There's an honor code, which makes him a very interesting villain, and it's why actually pairing Predator and Alien up as a thing is an interesting idea, because the Predator's an intelligent species who has rules and has honor, and the alien's this just organism that multiplies.
It's a literal walking weapon.
Yeah.
So
super interesting.
So I will eventually get around to the AVP. I won't confirm when, but you have a pretty good guess.
Just remember though, they come after 2. It's like Predator, Predator 2, AVP 1, 2, and then the other Predators.
All right, well, I doubt I'm going to be able to fit in Predator 2, so I'll just take that as the loss. But regardless.
What do you mean?
I'm saying that I've got other homework in between. I don't think I could fit in Predator 2 before I do AVP.
Oh, I'm not saying you have to do it before we get to the next Alien movies. I just mean, like, no, you watch Predator 2 next. Like, when you get back to Predator, watch Predator 2. Look, the world's not going to end if you've not watched Alien versus Predator Requiem before Alien Romulus, okay? The world will move on.
I will care, Pete. I will know.
Fine, we'll do an extra episode somewhere just so you've got extra homework.
All right, well, hold on. Let's not jump the gun here.
Like you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
All right.
But now you have to watch Predator 2. Predator 2 is the best one.
Okay, yeah, I'll get to Predator 2.
I'm not saying it's better than 1, but it's out of the rest of them, it's the best one.
That's fair.
Well, actually, no, that Prey exists. That's maybe not true. But
Peter, we've been going 2.5 hours. Wrap up this episode.
It's been a long episode, okay? Yeah. We actually have around the same time as Back to the Future last episode. Well, that was the last recording, not the last episode, but...
Right.
Yeah.
And next up, we have Rebel Moon Part 2, so...
Oh, I don't want to do Rebel Moon Part 2. I hate it.
It's going to be fun. I like how Rebel Moon Part 2 is already out, and we delayed it so that we could have Alien Day as a priority.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. No, Alien Day is more important than Rebel Moon 2. Zack Snyder can eat my shit. So that's our Prometheus episode. We'll see you next time for Rebel Moon Part 2. I'm not looking forward to that. But thank you very much for joining us. Check out all the other content. Dan Season's like going on over in Collector's Cut. The bonus stuff's over on Patreon, but thank you very much for joining us. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Science Fiction and Computer at Salsa.